Good morning. I'm Kenya McDuffie, at-large council member and chair of the council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today is Thursday, June 20th, 2024, and we're convening this hearing in person in 412 of the John A. Wilson Building and via Zoom. The time is 1:03 p.m. and I'm calling this public hearing to order. Today, the committee will receive testimony on several bills and resolutions. Bill 25-619, the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023, Bill 25-658, the Housing and Downtown Tax Abatement Technical Amendment Act of 2024, Proposed Resolution 25-804, the American Association of Colleges and Universities Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024, Proposed Resolution 25-805, the Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024, Proposed Resolution 25-850, the Washington Latin Public Charter School Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024, Bill 25-488, the Mount Vernon Eastern Market, Barracks Road, Great Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Amendment Act of 2023. And as a reminder, public witnesses will each have 3 minutes to provide testimony and should remember to mute their microphones if they are testifying virtually and not speaking. I introduced Bill 25-619, the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023 on December 6, 2023. The bill was referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on December 19th of 2023. This bill, as introduced, would reform the Clean Hands law that requires applicants for certain licenses or permits to have no outstanding debts to the district. This requirement has become a burden in unintended ways, especially for low-income residents and Black residents who are more likely to have unpaid debts. The law makes it harder for them to get opportunities to get a job or to start a business to pay off those debts. In the last council period, I introduced Bill 24-237, the Clean Hands Certification Equity Amendment Act of 2021, which the council passed to exempt driver's license or permits from the Clean Hands requirement. The bill which we are considering today builds on that prior work. After hearing from businesses and advocacy groups, I focused this new bill on addressing 2 aspects of the Clean Hands framework meant to support economic growth and getting more people back to work. First, the bill proposes raising the low debt threshold of $100 to $2,500. Second, the bill would exempt from the Clean Hands requirement occupational and business licenses that are necessary for people to work and pay off the debt. I understand that there are other challenges with the system, including with payment plans, that we should evaluate as well in our reform efforts. I look forward to the testimony on these and other ideas from the public and government witnesses present today and testifying. One important update on this bill is that with the support of my colleagues on the council, I was able to include in the fiscal year 2025 Budget Support Act part of Bill 25-619. Specifically, a Budget Support Act subtitle raises the debt threshold from $100 to $1,000 for non-Department of Motor Vehicle debt. This is a much-needed partial reform that the committee prioritized and expects final passage by the full council when the Budget Support Act comes up for second and final reading next week. While I am proud of our work and successes to date on this issue, we have more work to do. And that is why we're moving forward with the hearing on this bill today. I don't think any of my colleagues from the committee have joined today, and so I am going to turn to our first panel of public witnesses. And again, we ask participants to please mute their microphones when they are not speaking. First panel of public witnesses include Melissa Miller, Jen Jenkins, Michaela Deming, Marla Lahat. So we have 3 of the first 4 witnesses. Sophia Belmian Spencer, present. Come on up. And good afternoon to each of you. Thank you for joining us here at the Wilson Building in person. I'm going to turn to Melissa Miller first.
Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie and members and staff of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I'm Melissa Millar, Policy Director at ZEDEC DC. I'm a Ward 7 resident and proud alum of the UDC David A. Clark School of Law, where ZEDEC DC is headquartered. We also have an office in Ward 8. ZEDEC DC strongly supports Bill 25619 and has filed detailed record testimony. This bill would right a longstanding wrong. A 1996 law meant to deter littering and delinquent tax filing is now blocking residents with district government debt over $100 from obtaining or renewing occupational and business licenses. ZEDEC DC's locked-out report, provided with our written testimony, shows how the Clean Hands Law has ballooned over time and the harm it causes to workers, businesses, and economic competitiveness of the district. The Clean Hands Law harms workers and deters entrepreneurship because the $100 threshold has gone unchanged for decades. 1 in 5 professional positions in DC, over 125 occupations and businesses, requires a Clean Hands certificate prior to licensure. These include jobs that are pathways to stability, like plumbers, social workers, barbers, and HVAC technicians. This bill would eliminate Clean Hands occupational licensure barrier while also raising the Clean Hands threshold to $2,500 to ensure residents access to other programs, services, and benefits. Reforming the Clean Hands Law uplifts 2 of DC's underserved communities, communities of color, and communities with disabilities. The DC Council's Office of Racial Equity has already found that Clean Hands disproportionately blocks Black residents from occupational licenses, reinforcing DC's racial wealth gap by shaping wealth-building opportunities. Only 5.2% of DC's businesses are Black-owned, compared to nearly 70% of DC's businesses that are white-owned. Black DC residents are 3 times more likely to have a disability than white residents, and adults with disabilities experience poverty at more than twice the rate as adults without disabilities. Fine and fee-based debts leave applicants unable to renew or obtain occupational and business licenses. Eliminating this barrier will support residents' ability to choose their profession, maximize their potential, education, training, and interests, and earn higher wages, while also contributing more to the district's tax base. Clean Hands also hurts district businesses. All businesses need employees with the ability to meet their requirements, including licensure. However, DC is the only jurisdiction in our region where the plain language of the law can disqualify an individual from obtaining occupational and business licenses due to an unpaid parking and traffic-related debt. Its restrictive licensing system makes it harder for businesses to hire workers, creating a competitive disadvantage with neighboring states. As just one example, one ZEDEC DC client, Stephanie, a Black Ward 7 resident, seeks to practice as a speech pathologist in the district, where less than 6% of speech pathologists are Black, but due to her debts to DC, instead has had to practice in Maryland and Virginia. These harms have not gone unnoticed. The Washington City Paper and Washington Informer have published articles, also included in the record submission, highlighting the racial equity problems that the current Clean Hands system and the need for reform. A coalition of over 20 organizations has joined together in supporting this reform. Community members, ranging from occupations as different as immigrant food vendors, handymen, and speech pathologists, have also told us the difficulties they face in receiving occupational and small business licenses. Reforming Clean Hands, as proposed by this bill, will unlock the system for workers and thereby meaningfully improve the quality of DC residents' lives. Thank you for championing this reform and the opportunity to testify today on this important legislation.
And thank you for your well-timed testimony. Thank you for that. Next.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and staff. My name is Jen Jenkins, and I'm Policy Counsel at Legal Aid DC. Here to testify before you in support of Bill 25-619, the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023. We're also members of the coalition that my colleague over here just mentioned. The committee should pass this measure in order to help close the untenable racial wealth gap between Black and white DC residents, to increase the likelihood of new businesses in the district, and to expand the available workforce for businesses. This measure's promise to improve access to business and occupational licenses is vital for the nearly 24,000 workers in DC who rely on these types of licenses for their livelihood. Reforming the district's Clean Hands Act by raising the debt threshold from $100 to $5,000 would mitigate the impacts of poverty while ensuring district businesses have access to a larger workforce. While Legal Aid appreciates the proposed increase to the Clean Hands debt threshold from $100 to $1,000 in the FY 2025 Budget Support Act, we ask that this committee pass this measure to increase the debt threshold further to $5,000, so district residents can obtain the licensure needed to gain or increase their income. The increased access to occupational and business licenses would benefit residents like our clients who live at or below 200% of the federal poverty level, many of whom may be interested in obtaining occupational or business licenses to increase their income, but cannot afford to pay their debt to the district. The Clean Hands fines and fees-based ban on occupational and small business licenses exists solely for the purpose of revenue generation for the district, regardless of a worker's ability to pay. Across DC, thousands of residents cannot afford to pay off their debt to the district, and as a result are excluded from working in over 125 different occupations. While the payment of a fine or ticket is a mere inconvenience to most high-income residents, it can be the difference between paying rent or buying food for low-income, disproportionately Black and Brown residents. Further, the personal and community consequences of being shut out of the workforce cannot be overstated. The committee should correct this harmful policy choice by passing this proposed legislation. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
And thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Next.
Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie. I'm Marla Lahad, and I am the Executive Director of Home Care Partners. Home Care Partners is a nonprofit home care agency that provides 3 services through generous funding from the DC Department of Aging and Community Living. The one I'm going to focus on is our Homemaker program that provides licensed home health aides to older DC residents. As I'm sure you're aware, there is a severe shortage of licensed home health aides and certified nursing assistants in DC. This in turn negatively impacts the availability of care for some of our most vulnerable populations. As a provider of home care services to low and moderate income DC residents for 67 years, Home Care Partners can confirm that this is the most severe workforce crisis we have ever faced. In 2023, district-wide, over 4,000 home health aides and CNAs did not renew their licenses, exacerbating an already severe workforce crisis. Why did they give up their licenses? There are many different reasons, but for some, the Clean Hands certification was the final straw. Home Care Partners employs close to 100 DC home health aides. These are the people that travel throughout the city to assist older persons and adults to live in their own homes. These are the people that make it possible for their clients to remain safely and at a better, more cost-effective rate than going to a nursing home. At Home Care Partners, 100% of our home health aides are persons of color, 95% are female. Their average wage is between $20 and $21 per hour, which is more than most home care workers, but yet their personal budgets are very tight. Every year at license renewal time, we have home health aides who cannot get past the Clean Hands certification. Often they owe parking tickets and other minor fees to the district. Although we try to assist them with the payment plans and other types of assistance, it is a huge burden that many cannot afford. We have heard from workers that it is simply too big of an obstacle. It is just easier to forego their DC license and go to work in Maryland or Virginia. The Clean Hands certification requirement disproportionately impacts individuals just like our home health aides, minority low-wage earners. We need to make it easier, not harder, for these workers to obtain and renew their licenses. Eliminating the Clean Hands requirement for occupational licenses is one step toward this goal. Thank you very much.
And thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Next and final witness for this panel. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Councilperson McDuffie and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Sophia Blemian Spencer, and I'm an attorney at the Washington Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and Urban Affairs. I'm here today on behalf of the committee to urge the council to pass the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, and Revitalization Amendment Act. In its current iteration, the Clean Hands law prohibits the DC government from issuing small businesses and occupational licenses to individuals who owe over $100 of debt to the district. This creates a barrier between people who have some debt to the district and the potential for income for more than 125 licensed professions. These professions are largely low-income jobs that residents of color disproportionately represent, including havoc cleaners, barbers, cosmetologists, nurses, social workers, plumbers, and many more. Recently, the DC Council's Office of Racial Equity reported that Black residents are disproportionately blocked from obtaining licenses and starting businesses, leaving them disproportionately impacted by fines with fewer opportunities to build incomes that could help them repay the debt. For those individuals who cannot pay off their debt without income, the Clean Hands law creates a poverty trap. The amendment would alleviate this trap by creating 2 changes to the Clean Hands law. One, exempting occupational and business licenses from the clean hands requirement altogether, and two, raising the debt threshold to $2,500. In our own work, we have seen the Clean Hands Law significantly impact the lives of our clients. While we encourage the DC Council to pay close attention to the testimonies our clients have submitted, I'll highlight a few of their experiences here today. First, the Clean Hands Law has created barriers for several of our street vendor clients. During the pandemic, the vendors, like many retailers, closed their business for public health reasons. While they were not working, their vending licenses expired, however not suspended, resulting in the district continuing to charge them a minimum sales tax fee of $375 per quarter. The vendors were left in a catch-22 because they were not working during the pandemic. They could not afford to pay this debt. And because of the Clean Hands Law, they could not get back to work and earn the money necessary to pay off the debt. While the DC Council passed the Street Vendor Amnesty Program in 2023, allowing street vendors with eligible debt to obtain a license, there are still more than 124 occupations for which the Clean Hands Law is a barrier. For example, one of our clients, a speech pathologist therapist who my colleague Melissa Millar mentioned, although she has been a district resident since 2007 and holds a doctorate degree in speech pathology and licenses in both Maryland and Virginia, she has not been able to become licensed in DC. She has significant traffic debt, which she is working to pay off incrementally. However, under the current text of the law, this debt would be a bar to her becoming licensed. While there's a great need for Black speech pathologist therapists in the district, our client has spent a majority of her career working in neighboring states and most recently had to take a temporary position in North Dakota. This amendment is necessary to remove unjustified barriers to work for thousands of DC residents and create pathways for mobility and economic success. We appreciate the work the DC Council has already done around the Clean Hands Law. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony this afternoon, each of you for your testimony. I just have a couple of questions, and I'll see if we get joined by any of the members of the committee. But for now, I'm gonna ask this first question of Melissa Millar. I think it was late last year when your organization released a report about how broadly the restrictive clean hands requirement restricts occupational and business licensing. And the report stated that 125 distinct occupations were impacted. I think a few of the witnesses have witnessed that, have mentioned that number. I want, if you could, just expand on what you discovered in that report for the benefit of those who have not yet had the opportunity to read it as we have at the committee.
Yeah, so our locked out report notes that thousands of people, potentially up to 48,000 people, and up to 125,000 or 125 or more occupations require licensure to do their jobs. And if they owe $100 or more to the district, they simply don't have that ability to get the licensure. Clean Hands has been on the books for going on 30 years. And the threshold, the $100 threshold has not been increased in all of that time. And as you know, there are fines and fees that occur in the district that could easily be $100 or more. Traffic fines could double over after 30 days. So you could have a $100 traffic ticket double and not be able to pay. The district does not have good considerations for ability to pay for people who are of low income. And the payment plan processes that currently exist typically will require like a 25% down payment in order to establish a payment plan. And for a lot of district residents of low income who may have significant debt, that is a difficult thing to establish out of the gate. And so ultimately, there's just a very large barrier for just a significant number of district residents.
Sure.
And they can't do what they have been trained to do and educated to do.
I want to ask about just really the efficacy of this law. As you mentioned, it's been quite some time since it's been in effect. I think in 2026, it will have been 30 years that the law has been on the books. And if any of you can speak to what the original intentions of the law was, and in your opinion, how well it's fared in achieving the goals that it had originally. I think it's important for folks to just have a sense of really the efficacy of bills like this, and as they think about what the impact has been for some district residents. I'm going to turn back. Oh, go ahead.
So as I noted in my testimony, it was something originally started during the days of the Financial Control Board and was meant to address some of the low-level issues occurring in the district, like littering, and to ensure that people were paying taxes. But over the intervening 28 years, it has expanded as a way of capturing revenue and has multiple different streams, for lack of a better term, has been included into the Clean Hands Law so that various fines, fees, taxes, things like Department of Employment Services and UI unemployment insurance has also been included into it so that it touches a wide swath of financial responsibilities that people have with the district, which can then limit their ability to receive those benefits, program services, and things like licenses. So it started off as a way to address very low-level civic issues, but has really just impacted people's ability to earn a living and have community within their
Yeah,
community.
and in some cases, the ability to actually earn a living and be able to pay whatever it is that they owe, right? So obviously unintended consequences of a major import. Let me ask about if any of you all can speak to what other jurisdictions are doing, right? So there may be somebody sitting home saying, okay, person not paying their taxes, then perhaps they shouldn't be able to get an occupational license or some other benefit from the District of Columbia government. There are, jurisdictions in our region that have some similar laws, but they don't seem to go as far and to be as punitive as the district's law. Can anybody speak to what some of the other jurisdictions are doing?
And I can just speak to Maryland and Virginia
Okay.
because we have aides in Maryland and Virginia. We also, as a home care agency, are licensed in all three jurisdictions. Only the district requires this. I can't speak for the rest of the country, but the Clean Hands certification is unique to the district among these three tri-state areas.
Yeah. And I think did you mention in your testimony, some of the aides will forego the license in the district and maintain a license in Maryland or Virginia. And I would imagine that also has sort of downstream impacts on the district in terms of employment sectors and our ability to have aides who care for individuals in the city.
Yeah, absolutely. And this year was particularly stark. We had over 4,000 of our licensed home health aides and CNAs. They all had to renew in October of 2023, and 4,000 did not renew.
Wow.
That's a huge number, and it really impacts our ability to provide care.
That is a huge number. That is a huge number. I can't remember which one of the witnesses mentioned payment plans. I think Melissa Millar, you, in your response to my initial question, you may have referenced them, but do any of you all have experience with any of your clients or know of anybody who's attempted to enter into a payment plan but faced challenges with them? I mean, we've heard here at the committee stories about the challenges with payment plans where individuals would like to enter into a payment plan. Do any of you all have any experience with that or heard any stories related to payment plans?
Specifically with our street vendor clients, they were actually not offered any payment plan the first few times they went. It wasn't until staff from our organization and CBED DC and another community organization called Beloved Community Incubator went and asked multiple times. So for the first few years that this debt was piling up, they did not even know a payment plan was an option.
Okay, thank you for that. I think it was Jen Jenkins. I mentioned in my opening statement and you mentioned in your testimony what the committee was able to do with the support of my colleagues at the council in terms of raising the debt threshold from $100 to $1,000 in the Budget Support Act. And we expect that it will be passed on second and final reading next week. But just talk about the difference between 1,000 or 2,500 or I think 5,000 is what you recommended in your testimony.
Yes.
If you
sure.
could pull the mic a little bit closer so we can pick you up.
Sure. I think that we just are recommending for you to take as an expansive approach as possible. We don't want to, I think Melissa gave the example of your debts can easily increase just from one month to the next. If you're late, if you couldn't pay initially, it's going to grow and you still can't pay. So we want this committee to just consider as increasing the amount to as high as you can go. We said 5,000, but whatever would be reasonable given the context of inflation, high costs, and a person's ability to pay.
Yeah. I think that's a really important point and a priority for the committee. Are there other priority areas for reform that you all want to mention before I go to the next panel? Priority areas of reform so that Clean Hands works in a way that I think still protects against scofflaws, but does not inequitably prevent low-income residents from participating and contributing to the district's local economy, particularly as we're trying to find ways to grow our local economy, attract more jobs in more industries. Are there other priority areas beyond what you all have already discussed that we should be looking at? Okay, all right. Thank you very much for your testimony. Really do appreciate it. We'll make sure we incorporate, if any of you haven't already provided your written testimony to the committee, if you can do so, we'd appreciate it. Call up our next panel. Michael Johnson, Katie McConville, Andrew Shapiro, Amelia Kama. How about Commissioner Ameni? 4D02. Okay, great. This will be our second panel. Thank you each for joining the committee for this very important hearing. We're going to begin this panel with Michael Johnson.
Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Michael Johnson. I am a policy analyst at the DC Fiscal Policy Institute. Today, DCFPI, we applaud the efforts by you, Councilmember McDuffie, and this committee, as well as the DC Council to raise the debt threshold applicable under the Clean Hands Act to $1,000 under the fiscal year 2025 budget. While it's an important step towards greater equity, the council could achieve more progress through the passage of the legislation before us today, B25-0619. In addition to advancing racial equity, my testimony will mainly focus on concerns about the bill's potential fiscal impact. Throughout the 2025 budget process, the council has hesitated to raise the Clean Hands debt threshold to the 2,500 level as proposed in the Clean Hands Economic Expansion Act due to concerns about the legislation's cost. Because of these fiscal concerns in the fiscal year 25 Budget Support Act, the council instead limits the threshold of allowable debt to $1,000 and excludes DMV-related debts. However, Central Collections Unit, CCU, revenue data collected to date suggests that fiscal concerns about the bill's implementation may be overstated. Although the OCFO projects the Clean Hands Economic Expansion Act to have an unspecified negative fiscal impact due to anticipated reductions in CCU collections, the revenue impact of similar legislation exempting driver's license from the Clean Hands law suggests CCU collections have not declined as much as the OCFO anticipated, which is one of the major contingent points of the prior bill. The fiscal impact statement for the Clean Hands Certification Equity Amendment passed in 2022 projected CCU revenues to decline by $2.5 million annually starting in fiscal year 24. However, based on initial CCU revenue collections to date, fiscal year 24 collections, CCU collections are consistent with projections prior to the 2021 bill and do not indicate this level of revenue decline. In the first 2 quarters of fiscal year 24, the CCU has collected just over $21 million, nearly all of which is DMV-related debts. And if revenue collections remain consistent with the first two quarters, the CCU is projected to collect just over $42 million in fiscal year 24. According to the fiscal year 22 revenue estimates completed a year prior to the passage and implementation of the driver's license exemption bill, the OCFO projected CCU revenue collections to be just over 40.5 million for this fiscal year. So the revenue collections to date suggest that CCU revenue collections are not only expected to remain level, but possibly increase since the passage of the 2021 Clean Hands Bill. And so, although we can't assume that exempting occupational and business licenses as proposed in this bill will have the same fiscal impact, it is still unclear truly the impact of this proposed bill. And lastly, I'll just say that we know that this bill would advance racial equity for many of the reasons my colleagues have stated, and we strongly support the passage of this bill as well as the recommendations lifted up by SEDEC as well.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Next, good to see you, Andrew.
Greetings, Committee on Economic Development and Councilmember McDuffie for holding this very important and necessary and long overdue hearing. When we talk about legislative achievements, we often focused on the biggest and grandest programs while we overlook deeply important changes that affect the quality of life and everyday experience in a way that cannot always be measured, but with a true impact that can be determined by simply how easy it is to conduct a process that was previously onerous, confusing, beyond frustrating, and disproportionately affecting communities that least had the resources to fight them. The Clean Hands process is the complete embodiment of what bad, harmful, and disproportionately affecting processes and bad government looks like, and how it can turn a once maybe reasonable idea into a complete nightmare. I believe that government works, and the reason government works is because people are committed to evolving and improving and finding new processes and ways of approaching and creating new operating standards that are in line with our regional partners and improve the sometimes wrong belief that DC is bad for business. With a business environment dominated by small and local, long-time and first-generation owned startups and small consultancies, retails of all varieties, DC is diverse and fluid and is a welcoming place for so many that have been able to create a life and success for themselves here that they cannot in other places. Unfortunately, the Clean Hands law disproportionately affects these businesses and people and prevents them from being able to serve their communities and provide important amenities and services, and often in places that are overlooked by other parts of the community in the city. We are grateful to the DC government and Mayor Bowser, the Department of Small and Local Business, the Department of Consumer License Protection, and DC Council for recognizing the immense challenges faced by these businesses and simple procedures like the Clean Hands process and the necessity for reforming it. And we appreciate working with and collaborating with all stakeholders to arrive at a process that is easy to navigate, is financially equitable, and removes many of the frustrations business owners have when undertaking simple processes like renewing their business licenses, permits, and obtaining necessary funding. Simple improvements like the Clean Hands reform can also have a profound effect on the mindset and psychology of these business owners and help reframe and shape their views towards processes otherwise cumbersome and frustrating and feeling like everything is working against them. In my engagement with hundreds of business owners across the city, I observed how this can vastly affect the mindset and approach of a business owner and their willingness to be engaged and participate and not view the experience as trying to make it difficult for them to be viable and supporting contributors to our communities and neighborhoods. I'll go ahead and pause and I'll just submit the rest of my testimony. But we thank you very much. And I also want to thank the previous panelists who noted the issue in the health world. This is also a huge issue in the dental world, where there is also a lack of qualified health assistants.
Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Next.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and members of the committee. My name is Amelia Kalma, and I'm the Director of Research and Policy at the DC Policy Center, an independent, nonpartisan think tank advancing policies for a strong, competitive District of Columbia. And I want to thank you for the opportunity to testify on Bill 250619, the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, Revitalization Amendment Act. Access to economic opportunity, as we know, can change the course of a person's life And yet currently, according to one study, up to 10% of the population could currently be prevented from obtaining the clean hands certification necessary to obtain a business license or occupational license, permit, or grant here in DC because they owe as little as $100. This includes licenses to be a landlord, a food vendor, a barber, a cosmetologist, a nursing assistant, and many more occupations, presenting a barrier to entrepreneurship and an opportunity to join the workforce, particularly for residents of limited means who could benefit the most from economic opportunity. Raising the threshold for clean hands from $100 to $2,500, this act increases opportunities for residents and increases racial equity. As we know, fixed fines and fees disproportionately harm people of color and low-income people, as systemic wealth and income inequalities make it difficult for these groups to pay back fines. Increasing this threshold thus removes a punitive barrier for those wishing to enter the workforce and increases opportunities for people to build wealth and earn income. We, similar to previous witnesses here, support the increase in the Budget Support Act, but we think that the proposed $2,500 threshold in this act would be the best for the future of residents, businesses, and the city as a whole. In addition to raising the debt threshold, the DC Policy Center recommends also following changes to clean hands legislation. First, clean hands should only be applied to overdue debts. Currently, in DC, one must only be in debt for 1 day to prompt the denial of clean hands, whereas Maryland and Virginia require 120 days overdue debts and 90 days overdue debts, respectively, to trigger a business license denial. This makes DC less competitive than our neighbors in its ability to attract workers and companies and reduces economic development in the city. Second, if an individual or business receives a notice of noncompliance for clean hands, it should state the reason and agency to which money is owed. Currently, determining the reason for a notice of noncompliance is time-consuming, as there's a huge variety of sources in which money could be owed, including past utility bills, speeding tickets, fines to different agencies, late tax filings, and overdue taxes. More information would make it easier for business owners and promote repayment of debts. And finally, the council should consider limiting fines and fees, including clean hands certification. In Maryland and Virginia, they limit it to qualifying debts and unpaid taxes, unfiled returns, and unpaid child support. And the council should consider what kinds of debts are most relevant to business licensure in DC and consider limiting the kinds of debt that are considered for clean hands certification. Thank you.
And thank you very much for your testimony. Next, Commissioner.
Chairperson McDuffie, my name is Abel Amene, and I serve as an advisory neighborhood commissioner for single member district 4D02, which is the Great Kennedy Street neighborhood of Brightwood Park. I come before you today to not only represent my constituency, but on behalf of the entire Advisory Neighborhood Commission 4D, which has authorized me to speak on their behalf on this matter. At our public meeting on March 20th, 2024, ANC 4D unanimously passed a resolution in support of the Clean Hands Economic Expansion and Revitalization Amendment Act. ANC 4D's resolution, which has been submitted to the council and on this committee and can be found on the council's LIMS system, takes note of the following. The current Clean Hands law, which was first adopted in 1996 and significantly expanded in 2012, automatically disqualifies anyone with more than $100 in unpaid fines and fees of any kind from obtaining DC governmental occupational and small business licenses. Clean Hands deprives critical income from working class families. It reinforces cycles of poverty and exacerbates racial inequalities by automatically disqualifying already financially distressed residents from securing employment. This law affects more than 125 occupations representing more than 48,000 DC workers, including barbers, cosmetologists, nurses, therapists, funeral directors, social workers, plumbers, HVAC technicians, and most notably, street vendors, many of whom live in my ANC, as well as other vocations crucial to the district's economy. Nearly 1 in 5 DC workers must obtain an occupational license before they can legally do their jobs. But the Clean Hands law disqualifies tens of thousands of DC residents from obtaining and renewing an occupational and small business license to the inability to pay minor governmental fines and fees. Residents of ANC 4D particularly affected, especially those working as street vendors. Many of them, a few of them testified before us before we passed this resolution. I'm going to skip ahead. I will submit my testimony in writing to speak about exactly what our resolution says. ANC 4D's resolution calls for a number of things. First and foremost, ANC 4D fully endorses the proposed Clean Hands Economic Expansion and Revitalization Amendment Act. Second, the resolution calls upon the council to hold a hearing. Thank you for already doing that. Congratulations for that. The resolution also recommends that the committee amend the bill to tie clean hands threshold limit to an economic index that adjusts with changing conditions rather than a fixed amount. 5,000 actually sounds better than 2,500 on our behalf. Finally, and most importantly, ANC 4D urges the council to pass the bill and completely eliminate clean hands as a barrier to working class people obtaining or renewing their occupational license. And beyond that, also raising the threshold for other licenses to the amount that has been indicated. Thank you very much for allowing me to testify.
And thank you for taking the time to testify, Commissioner, and for providing a resolution to the committee for the record. Amelia Kama, you had mentioned three specific things. I was having trouble finding your testimony. I wasn't sure. Did you get a chance to submit it yet?
Not my testimony.
Well, I know you mentioned that you're going to submit yours later, Commissioner, but what about you, Amelia?
I did submit it this morning,
Oh.
but I would be happy to resubmit or send your office a copy.
Yeah, that'd be great. And if you could restate the third point that you made in your testimony?
Absolutely. When the Clean Hands Act was originally passed, its purpose was to deter littering, illegal dumping, and delinquent tax filings. And then moving and parking infractions and pass-through utilities were added in 2001 when DC was trying to raise additional funds. So Virginia and Maryland limit the qualifying debts for business licensure to unpaid taxes, unfiled returns, and unpaid child support, whereas DC considers unpaid utility bills, moving violations, and many more fines. And so I think it would be prudent to review what kinds of debts are most relevant to business and occupational licensure in DC and consider actually limiting the kinds of debt that are considered for clean hands.
Yep. And you mentioned Maryland. Did you also mention Virginia in terms of what theirs includes?
Yes.
Okay. Andrew Shapiro, I appreciate you testifying and really representing sort of the position of some of the folks you work with in the business community. How important is this bill to the folks that you know who work in the business community and their ability to really operate?
I think it would be, sorry, I think it would be greatly important. A lot of the businesses I work with are actually in his ANC, although I'm not here on behalf of that organization. In my capacity working with Main Streets, one of the places that we've seen this is obviously in like funding is a huge issue. And, if you're behind and you're trying to get caught up, I'm working with one business that is really behind in sales tax. They were thankfully able to get on like a payment plan, but the minute you get behind, all those being behind have their own penalties. And so it's just a self-inflating process where once you start going down that hole. And so to not have the ability to even obtain funding resources because of this is just absolutely insane.
Yeah.
I think it also goes to show how like a tax, maybe when it's implemented in one place, 23 years later, it's completely spiraled to a totally different place. And maybe why, kind of taxing these sorts of things as other people have noted is not the right approach. I know someone who just moved out of the district and they are getting water bills for a property they don't even own. So imagine you're a business owner trying to navigate that process. Maybe you're getting someone else's utility bills. You're trying to figure out why maybe the previous business did not pay their utilities. Now you have to navigate that process. I don't.
We appreciate it. Thank you. And Commissioner, I know you represent a part of Kennedy Street. Remind me, what are the business corridors that are included in your SMD?
Well, we have the Kennedy Street itself as a corridor. My ANC stretches from Georgia Avenue all the way to Kansas, all the way to 3rd Street. And it is an area that really needs, new businesses to come in. There's lots of property that are blighted and just sitting there and have not had the opportunity. And, it points to one of the barriers is clean hands, and lifting this would definitely help in revitalizing that Kennedy Street.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Some of you and other witnesses have mentioned the more than 125 different types of occupations that the Clean Hands Law affects. And just yesterday was Juneteenth, and myself and members of my team and Department of Small Local Business Development Director Rosemary Suggs Evans, as well as Salima from the Mayor's Office of Nightlife and other both government officials. We had some ANCs out. We did a business walk along U Street and spoke with any number of businesses. And we had the opportunity to visit with at least 3 barbershops and hair salons. Actually, it might have been 4. But I couldn't help, even though, there was some people in there, some patrons inside, I couldn't help but see some of the empty chairs and wonder, as we were contemplating this hearing today, how many potential, people could be occupying those chairs in terms of operating and working and making money for themselves and their families, were it not for this Clean Hands Law that does tend to impact those types of occupations, and in many instances, jobs that are held by minorities and women. And so I wanted to mention that and thank you each for your testimony this afternoon. Michael, we already have yours in writing. We really appreciate it. Really thoughtful testimony. So thanks for joining us all. Thank you. All right, we're going to call our next panel witnesses. My staff has informed me that one of our witnesses requires a translator, so I'm going to call that person up. The name is spelled Kahssay. Last name is Gebrebrhan. And also on this panel, we're going to call and then, so this will be our last witness who's testifying in person. I'm going to call, just so we can make sure we have a smooth transition, I'm going to call some of our virtual witnesses so you all can be migrated over. Sean Townsend with the Restaurant Association of Metropolitan Washington, Sandra Basanti, Kevin Reggie, Kristen Barden, Diane Gross, Malcolm Fox, and Andrew Klein will be our next panel, our first virtual panel. Right there. And good afternoon to you both. Thank you for joining us in chambers today. We're actually, staff, Daniel, if you can give 6 minutes. And really appreciate having you in person. You can begin your testimony.
All right. Thank you for the indulgence, and I'll be translating some of this.
Good afternoon. I am Kasai Gebrebrhan. I am a street vendor. ስሜ ካሳይ ገብረብርሃን እባላለሁ።
My name is Kasai Gebrebrhan.
የምኖረው ወርድ 2 ነው።
I live in Ward 2.
ከ1990 ጀምሬ አሜሪካ እኖራለሁ።
I've been living in America since 1990.
ከመጣሁ ጀምሬ እስካሁን ድረስ ስትሪት ቬንደር ነኝ።
Since coming here, I've been a street vendor in DC.
እና ለ29 ዓመት ስትሪት ቬንደር ሆኜ ሰርቻለሁ።
For 29 years, I've been working as a street vendor.
3 አዳፕሽን ልጆች አሳድጌያለሁ።
I've raised 3 adopted children.
አንድ ከመጣው ጀምሬ ላይሰንስ ታክስ እየከፈልኩ ሰርቻለሁ።
Since coming here, I've worked as a licensed street vendor and I've been paying my taxes.
አሁን በኮቪድ ምክንያት ከስራ ከቆምኩኝ ደግሞ እስካሁን ድረስ ስራ የለኝም።
Since COVID, I have not been able to work.
ከዛ በኋላ ደግሞ ላይሰንስን ላሳድስ ሄጄ ያልሰራሁትን ካልከፈልክ ላይሰንስ አናሳድስም ብለውኝ እስካሁን ስራ የለኝም።
After that, when going to renew my license, I've been told that I cannot renew it because of unpaid taxes.
ምክንያቱም መንግስት ደግሞ እኛን ምንም አላገዘንም። ያልሰራ ነው እንዴት ብለን ታክስ እንከፍላለን?
The government has not been helping us with this, and I am not able to pay the taxes that I owe for the time that I was not able to work.
ሳንሰራ ደግሞ ታክስ ከየት አምጥተን ነው የምንከፍለው?
If we don't work, how can we pay back the taxes that we owe?
ስለዚህ በጣም እስካሁን ድረስ ከብዶኛል። አሁን ስራ ለመጀመር ፈልጌ ደግሞ ታክሱ ካልተነሳ ክሊን ሃንድ ማግኘት አልችልም።
This has caused a lot of difficulty for me, and I cannot work without getting clean hands.
ስለዚህ አምኒስቲው ደግሞ ካልተነሳ ክሊን ሃንድ ማግኘት አልችልም።
Without the amnesty, and I cannot get clean hands and I cannot work.
ስለዚህ እርዳታ ፈልጋለሁ። ታክሱ እንዲነሳልን በተቻለ ስራ እንዲጀምር።
For this, I need assistance. I need the taxes owed to be lifted so I can go back to work.
ምን አለ ሌላ በቃ ታዲያ ምን አለ?
Thank you very much. That's it.
Thank you very much for taking the time to come down and share a very personal story. We really appreciate you taking the time to do that. I think you may have, go ahead.
That was kind of that's it.
Thank you.
You may have been here a little earlier during the first panel, but the point that you're making about your unpaid debts and your inability to get a vending license to pay your unpaid debt is, I think, one of the most important points that we can stress. I think it's sort of a cruel irony that people like yourself who want to work can't work because the city is not permitting you to get your vending license because you owe those unpaid taxes. So, I mean, to be able to pay those taxes, you need to be able to work, correct? If you could, both of you turn your mics on, that'd be great.
Yes, if I can't work, how can I pay the amount that I owe is what he responded.
It's the very question I think a lot of people are asking in terms of why this policy still exists in the way that it does. And so I think your story really captures the sentiments of so many people, way too many people across the District of Columbia who are similarly situated, who want to work, want to pay their taxes, but can't do so in the way that they would like if they can't get the license that they need from the District of Columbia.
What was the last part you said? I'm sorry.
No, just that I think his story is so representative of the thousands of people who are negatively impacted by the Clean Hands Law.
እሺ ሰው ሳይሰራ እንዴት ይከፍላል?
He repeats how can people pay back if they can't work?
It's a question that I think begs a response, and I'm not in a position to defend it at this point. So thank you for your testimony.
መናገር አልችልም። የምችል ከሆነማ ይህ
If he
ሁሉ
could speak
ዓመት
up
ስሰራ
just into the mic so we can
ይህ
capture it.
ሁሉ ዓመት ስሰራ ታክስ ከፍዬ ነው። አንድ ጊዜም አቋርጬ አላውቅም። ኮሮና መጥቶ ደግሞ ካቆመን በኋላ ሳልሰራ እንዴት እከፍላለሁ?
For the 29 years that I worked, I paid my taxes and I was on time. It was only because of COVID that I fell behind. And now that I can't go back to work because of it.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that. And again, your testimony is so important to creating this record for this bill, because as heartfelt and really unfortunate as your situation is, there's so many people who I'm sure have a similar situation as yours.
አውቃለሁ።
ያንተ testimony በጣም important ነው። በጣም ያግዘናል እና ታሪክ ያንተ ብቻ አይደለም፣ ሌሎችም ብዙ እንደዚህ አይነት
ችግር አላቸው።
Thank you once again.
ኦኬ፣ በቃ ኦኬ፣ thank you.
All right, take care. All right, we're going to move to our next panel, our virtual panel. And we are going to begin with Sean Townsend. Good afternoon to you. You can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and other members of the committee. RMW thanks you for allowing us the opportunity to provide comment on the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023. For more than 100 years, RMW has advocated and provided a community for over 1,400 entrepreneurs and small businesses in the greater Washington area. We count among our members beloved neighborhood spots, family-owned businesses, homegrown restaurant groups, and national favorites. Together, we are one of the largest job creators in the district and leading contributors to revenues. RMW strongly supports passage of the Clean Hands Certification Act. DC Council passed the first clean hand laws 28 years ago to deter littering, dumping, and delinquent taxes, as many others have said at this hearing. Over time, the breadth of what was the subject to Clean Hands ballooned as district agencies look for ways to increase revenue. Today, individuals who owe as little as $100 for everything from parking tickets to water bills are denied basic city services to conduct business, including occupational credentials, license renewals, technical aid, and grants. As you are hearing from several witnesses today, the process for obtaining a Clean Hands certification is overly complex and difficult. A business owner frequently is unaware of outstanding debt until they try to obtain or renew a license or apply for a grant. It can be unclear what the debt is, and even when a fee is paid to one agency, another office may show no record of it. Current clean hand laws deter activities the district should seek to foster entrepreneurship and small business ownership, and it prohibits these pursuits without due process. The laws also disproportionately affect communities of color by failing to recognize historic inequities such as limited to access to higher education and employment that can lead to hardship and debt. A proposal to modernize clean hand laws in the previous council session was met with resistance, and only a severely scaled back policy was passed. We're grateful to the council for raising the $100 threshold in the coming year's budget. However, and despite that, Clean Hands laws remains a tool to deny communities of color everything from professional licensing to small business ownership, and RMW continues to press for reform. Post-pandemic landscape remains challenging for restaurants, and we welcome all of the measures and proposals to support them. Reforming clean hand laws closely aligns with our shared missions of supporting and lifting up our community's small businesses, and for that reason, we enthusiastically support the swift passage of this legislation. Thank you.
And thank you so much for your testimony. Sean Townsend, our next witness is Sandra Basanti. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us virtually. You begin testimony, you have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie. As the Executive Director of the DC Nightlife Council and owner of Pie Shop, a local small business, I strongly support the Clean Hands Certification Economic Expansion Amendment Act of 2023. This important legislation, thoughtfully introduced by you, Chairman, addresses long-standing barriers and disproportionately affect our local business community. Firstly, the current $100 threshold to maintain a clean hand status is not only unrealistically low, but also imposes an unfair burden on business owners for minor debts equivalent to a parking ticket. Raising this limit to $2,500 reflects a more realistic approach to economic conditions today. Moreover, the requirement for a clean hand certification impacts not just business licensing, but also the ability to secure critical grants and other forms of government assistance. I can personally attest to the systemic inefficiencies within this process. 2 years ago, an inconsequential debt of approximately $1 stemming from a rounding discrepancy managed by a Department of Employment Services prevented my business from obtaining a much-needed grant. After nearly 2 weeks spent to locate the mystery debt, the lack of interagency communication and the absence of a central database to verify and rectify such debts meant significant financial opportunities were lost. The implications of the clean hands requirement extend significantly to the realm of alcohol license renewals, a critical aspect of the nightlife sector. Establishments across the district live in fear of operational halts while resolving unclear clean hands issues merely to renew their licenses. I urge that the bill be amended to explicitly include the removal of the clean hands requirement for alcohol license renewals, preventing unnecessary disruptions and supporting our vibrant nightlife community. Furthermore, to promote transparency and to modernize and streamline our interaction with city agencies, as well as interagency communication, I propose the establishment of a central database accessible by all relevant agencies. This platform should allow operators to clearly view any outstanding debts and upcoming fees across all agencies with streamlined methods for online payment. It is essential that we bring business regulation into the 21st century by creating a central portal that simplifies compliance and fosters a more business-friendly environment in the district. This bill is a step in the right direction, not only by proposing to increase the debt threshold, but also by advocating for the elimination of the clean hands requirement across several licensing processes. These reforms are crucial for fostering a supportive environment for entrepreneurship and business growth. I commend your leadership, Chairman McDuffie, in introducing this bill. By supporting the bill, the DC Council can significantly enhance the business landscape, reduce undue burdens, and promote equity and economic expansion. I am eager to see the positive changes that this bill will bring to our local businesses and the broader community. Thank you for considering my testimony, and I welcome any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony this afternoon. We're going to turn next to Kevin Reggie. Thank you for joining us. You can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you great. Thanks.
Great. I'm Kevin Reggie. I serve as advocacy consultant on behalf of the DC Chamber of Commerce. I'm pleased to testify today representing the member companies of the Chamber to enthusiastically support the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023. Council passed the first Clean Hands laws 28 years ago to deter littering, dumping, and delinquent taxes. Over time, the breadth of what was subject to clean hands expanded as district agencies looked for ways to increase revenue. While these restrictions may have originally been intended as a set of strict enforcement mechanisms to ensure that the district government is able to enforce its collection of debts, today their broader impact on job creation and economic development is overwhelmingly adverse. There are 3 specific ways in which the current clean hands restrictions are a detriment to the district. The first is that they reinforce racial discrepancies. The second is that they're anti-competitive with neighboring jurisdictions. And the third is that they're anti-growth and job creation. On the first front, clean hands have increasingly morphed into tools to deny communities of color everything professional licensing to small business ownership. You've already heard testimony on the ways in which those disparities have been institutionalized. Against this backdrop, the clean hands laws have had the practical effect of entrenching racial disparities by denying economic opportunities to Black and Brown residents who seek to start new businesses. The Council's Office of Racial Equality has said as much, and they have basically pointed out that these clean hands laws disproportionately impact Black residents and business owners. Clean hands are also, the current laws are also demonstrably anti-competitive. RAMW has some great data on this, and I'm happy to share that with you if you want further information on the disparities between Virginia and Maryland. And finally, the Clean Hands law is anti-growth. As was the case with the passage of the BEST Act, which will make it simpler, faster, and cheaper to obtain a basic license in the district. Efforts are currently needed to rethink and reform the ways our government may be inadvertently suppressing productive entrepreneurship and creating and resulting job creation. Studies consistently show that anywhere from 70 to 90% of jobs created by businesses that employ 70 to 90% of new jobs are created by businesses that employ fewer than 25 workers. The risk takers who start and grow these businesses are helping to beat a broader path to sustained economic growth. As a city, we need to work harder to shift the structural disincentives of economic opportunities that new and startup business owners can help create across all 8 wards. Advancement of this bill is the next step in the right direction to do so. I look forward to answering any questions you may have. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today.
And thank you for providing testimony today. Our next witness is Kristen Barton. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. You can begin your testimony.
Great. Good afternoon. My name is Kristen Barton. I'm the Executive Director of the Adams Morgan Partnership BID. I have been in this position since November 2008. The Adams Morgan Partnership BID was established in 2005 as one of DC's 12 business improvement districts. And next year, we will be celebrating our 20th anniversary of helping to keep Adams Morgan clean, safe, and friendly. I'm here today to support the Clean Hands Certification Act of 2023. The purpose of the Clean Hands Act is to amend Title 47 of the DC Code to exempt the issuance of occupational and business licenses from the Clean Hands certification requirement, and to increase the debt threshold applicable under the Clean Hands Act from $100 to $2,500. I support the changes to the Clean Hands law because it only takes a couple of moving violations or parking tickets to all of a sudden owe more than $100 to DC government. The $100 threshold is too low and has created a hardship for hundreds of business owners who were just trying to get or renew a business license or apply for a government grant. Increasing the threshold to $2,500 is more reasonable and allows more flexibility in the system. I have worked with hundreds of small business owners since 2008, and many of those were entrepreneurs just starting out. Everything we can do to make the business licensing process easier to understand, cheaper, and more straightforward will attract more small businesses to DC and lessen their load at the point when they most need it. I would also encourage the committee to extend the increased Clean Hands threshold of $2,500 to ABC licenses or alcohol licenses, and not limit it to just business and occupational licenses. I work with hundreds of restaurant owners who now face new challenges every day. They are still having trouble hiring since the pandemic, for example, and the easier we can make running a restaurant, the more restaurants we'll have in DC, paying sales taxes, employment taxes, and their employees paying income taxes. Thanks very much for the opportunity to testify today. I ask that the Clean Hands Certification Act is passed. In a period of government austerity, this will be an important tool to attract more small businesses to DC and offer employment and tax revenue to the city in many forms. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much for your testimony. Our next witness is Diane Gross. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining the committee this afternoon. You can begin your testimony.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman McDuffie and the committee for holding these important hearings on clean hands. My name is Diane Gross. I'm the owner of Cork Wine Bar and Cork Market Spring Valley. I also serve as chair of the RAMW Board of Directors and am a founding member of Regarding Her DC. I am here today to talk about the urgent need for this legislation as a representative of many restaurants, but also because of my own experience trying to obtain clean hands for my ABRA license renewal. Last week, when I asked a group of restaurant owners if they had ever had issues with clean hands, the response was overwhelming. In a group of 10 businesses, every single one of them had some issues over the years, either with getting a business license renewal or an ABRA license renewal. It's Purple Patch not getting a clean hands because of amounts allegedly owed to DC through DOES, even though the same restaurant statement showing $500 owed showed a $3,000 credit. She spent countless hours, and repeated emails to different agency contacts trying to get it resolved. It's Brooklyn's finest, who you'll hear from later today, who owed about $200 to DOES and never knew that until their license was not renewed. They could not access the online portal or pay the bill, a problem I have heard from countless others, with access codes denied, invalid, or number sequences changed over time. The agency won't address issues in emails or in person, and they ultimately had to send a check in the mail to get it resolved, which obviously took a lot of time. Restaurants have been denied license renewals, lost grant opportunities, and even relocated out of the district because of issues with clean hands. This has happened to restaurants like Sticky Fingers, We the Pizza, Good Stuff Eatery, Hank's Oyster Bar, Colada Shop, Pizzeria Paradiso, Supergirl, and Whist. This legislation will go a long way in helping all these issues, where there is not a significant amount owed, or there is a technicality, or where one agency is not talking to the other. My own story is very similar. After having DC lose a number of years of our personal tax returns, we were denied a clean hands. We had to resubmit taxes and show proof of payment from several years back. The crazy thing was that we actually had a letter from DC referencing one of the returns they said they never got. This was all for personal clean hands needed to get a license renewed, even though our business already had clean hands. Often denials are because of DC government error and not the business owner's fault. But even when it is an oversight of the business, it can be completely unknown until the clean hands is needed, and often there is little time to correct before the business is suddenly out of compliance. This legislation helps remove roadblocks to business operation and licensing. The examples that I said above, the current clean hands certification process is overly complex and frustrating. Business owners often become aware of outstanding debts only when it's time to renew licenses. This legislation makes DC more small business friendly. The current clean hand law discourages activities the district should be actively promoting, entrepreneurship and small business ownership, and takes business out of the city. These reforms in this bill align with our mission at RAMW. RAMW's mission is to support small business. Reforming clean hands laws is essential to achieve this goal. Therefore, we enthusiastically urge the swift passage of the Clean Hands Certification Economic Expansion and Revitalization Act, and thank Chairman McDuffie for his outstanding leadership on this important issue.
Thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon, Diane Gross. We appreciate it. We're going to turn next to Malcolm Fox. Good afternoon to you. You can begin your testimony. You will have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Councilmember. Am I up on video? Because I can't really see myself. There we go.
We
Great.
can see you and hear you.
Perfect. All right. Well, good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie and members of the committee. My name is Malcolm Fox, and I serve as Executive Director of Opportunity DC. Our coalition of DC businesses and residents believe that the District of Columbia's continued prosperity depends on a vibrant and diverse economy, equitable and efficiently delivered social services, and universal public safety. I'm testifying on our coalition's behalf to encourage this committee and the full council to pass the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023. The legislation that Councilmember McDuffie has proposed helps make business ownership more accessible to all residents of the district. By exempting occupational and business licenses from the Clean Hands certification requirement and increasing the debt threshold to $1,000, we can significantly reduce barriers for DC entrepreneurs. In turn, this will grow our tax base and increase the revenue that the district can reinvest into supporting its residents. Currently, the Clean Hands process prevents individuals with outstanding fines or fees, such as a single parking ticket, from obtaining or renewing a business license. The council previously recognized that denying driver's licenses to residents for as little as $100 in outstanding fines, fees, taxes, or utility bill payments was counterproductive and did not serve the public interest. So the council amended the law. However, the same barrier remains for residents attempting to start or expand their small businesses. It is time to extend the allowance that the council has previously made to business licenses too. Reforming the existing Clean Hands requirement, either by repealing it or substantially raising the threshold that triggers violations, will help align the policy with its actual intended goals. A $100 debt is not a significant barrier for those attempting to avoid their responsibility intentionally. But for DC entrepreneurs trying to work their way out of poverty, it can be an insurmountable obstacle to economic opportunity and mobility. Preserving this barrier would only exacerbate the challenges faced by low-income business owners without providing any substantial public benefit. For instance, a speeding ticket issued to a business owner, even if the business neither owns nor relies on motor vehicles, can send up a clean hands blockade. Similarly, a missed water bill payment can prevent an enterprise that doesn't even rely on water from operating lawfully. Furthermore, the clean hands rule has proven to be arbitrarily applied. The DC Policy Center has noted that we have yet to see the full effects of clean hands, as the necessary information sharing between departments for full enforcement has never been fully developed. This has resulted in a system that punishes those who attempt to comply while being less effective at deterring repeat offenders. The fiscal benefits of the clean hands policy are also questionable. As of May 2023, the Washington Post reported that more than 6.2 million traffic tickets, amounting to nearly 1.3 billion in fines and penalties, have gone unpaid since 2000. Clean Hands has done little to recover this lost revenue, while simultaneously preventing residents from taking the necessary steps to run their businesses and produce revenue for the District of Columbia. In conclusion, Clean Hands certification is a necessary reform to foster entrepreneurship and equitable economic growth in our city. It will remove unjust barriers and create a more inclusive environment for all residents to contribute to our economy. We urge the council to pass this common sense legislation, and particularly to listen to the voices of small business owners who are spending their time
Mr.
to
Fox.
testify in this legislation.
Your
I'm
time
sorry, I
is-
know I've gone over, so I will conclude my testimony and just say I really appreciate your years of leadership on this issue, Councilmember McDuffie.
And thank you for your testimony. We're going to turn to our final witness on this panel, and that's Andrew Klein. Good afternoon to you. You begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman McDuffie, and thank you for introducing this legislation, holding this hearing, and giving us all an opportunity to testify. I will submit written testimony, but want to focus today on a couple of issues. Certainly associate myself and RMW with the remarks of all the previous witnesses on this panel, frankly. My office, particularly my partner, Scott Rome, the last ABC renewal cycle handled over 100 clean hands issues. And we would love for you to legislate us out of this business of working through these. And one thing that's lacking in this legislation, as far as it goes, and a couple others commented on it, is that it does not currently, as written, apply to renewal of ABC licenses. And that means that if the policy that we're trying to advance today is not to interrupt individuals or businesses' ability to earn funds, to pay their debts, including their taxes, those that work in the hospitality industry will not be helped by this legislation, particularly those that have ABC managers licenses, and the businesses themselves that are licensed by ABCA, as you know. If the bill does not extend to allow those individuals and businesses to get clean hands, then it does, in our opinion, not go as far as it needs to go to rectify this problem. The other thing I want to raise is something that I have not heard, which is, look, certainly everyone needs to pay their taxes. Everyone should pay their taxes. That is and the other amounts that are due to the government. That is the goal of the whole clean hands concept. However, it need not be such a sword so as to interfere with people to continue with their livelihoods. And what we would suggest is that rather than, when renewal time comes, whether it be a business license or an ABC license or what have you, to the extent that these requirements continue, then in addition to what's been proposed, the debtor be given 120 days to get their account straight. And the response to that may be, well, they should do that in advance. But the reality is people don't do it in advance. Businesses don't do it in advance. They have other things on their mind, other issues to deal with. But when it gets to this point, it seems that just shutting them down or taking their license is too drastic for what's at stake, particularly with some of the other amounts that are due. And a more common sense approach would be you have 120 days to go work it out, enter into a payment plan, come up with a way to deal with this. And in those circumstances, many of those who are not helped by the lowering of the dollar threshold can be assisted. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to testify. We'll be submitting written testimony and I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I want to thank everybody on this panel for providing the committee with testimony. Just a couple questions. I'll note the testimony about including the renewal of ABC licenses, as many of the witnesses have stated. But can somebody tell me, because one of the things that jumps out at me is the impact that a clean hands or not being able to get a clean hands certification because you owe a debt to the district of $100 or more, but then not fully understanding perhaps how you got to this point. Or, I don't know, a better way to state it, if somebody can explain to me who has experience with this, what do you see when you receive a notice from the Chief Financial Officer's office stating that you cannot get clean hands? Like, what exactly does that convey to you as a person who is trying to perhaps renew an ABC license or get some other form of permit or some other government benefit that is not allowed because you owe a debt of $100 or more? What does it show you when you get it?
That's it. I mean, that begins an inquiry. And I think Amelia Kalma's testimony from the DC Policy Center is quite relevant in that more should be told. All it does is say you got a problem, and that begins an inquiry. Too frequently and ends up in my office, and my partner's got to go find out what's owed. But you don't know much.
Right. Yeah. When you go to mytax.dc.gov, and you go in to try to pull a clean hands, report or, clean hands form, it just denies you. Like, you don't know why. It just says, oh, sorry, it's not available. So, and so then you have to go and search and try to figure out, okay, who do I owe money to? It's not a user-friendly system.
Right.
And
And it's not, sounds like it's not clear cut. Go ahead, Diane.
No, I was just going to say, I've talked to countless restaurants where it's like begins the process that can be weeks and weeks. I mean, especially if it's a smaller business, they don't maybe have the resources to have Andrew's team go after and look for it, right? So they start looking for it. Meanwhile, their licenses are not up to date. They're out of compliance. They don't want to be out of compliance. They're happy to pay what it is, but they just can't find it. And then countless emails to agencies. Oftentimes they won't speak through the emails. They want you to call their hotline. They won't answer emails. One agency won't talk to the other. And so it really can be quite devastating. And just this anxiety of like, what is it? And you don't know.
Yeah. And to the point, I think Andrew Klein mentioned 120-day period, which I think is the amount of time permitted in Maryland for the debt to be overdue before the enforcement would occur. Would that be helpful if the law in the District of Columbia had a component similar to that?
Yeah, I mean, it would definitely be helpful because then the business is not scrambling to first figure out what it is under penalty of not being able to continue to operate, or in the case of an individual who has, say, an ABC manager's license, the inability to continue to work as an ABC manager. They have some time to sort it out. And again, if the goal is compliance and get people to pay, it just seems to make common sense to give people time to do that.
Chairman, I should add that one of the big challenges with clean hands is that these are interagency processes, right? You've got to figure out which agency has essentially flagged your status as clean hands. And that takes time. And that's why, you're engaging all these professionals to go sort through how you lift the clean hands barriers. And one of the things the district does not do well is these various multi-agency involved processes. And that's part of the impediment here, which is not easy to cut through. And I think, frankly, Andrew's got the right idea here. Let's at least give folks some time to sort through that process, because it's not an easy process to work your way through. Even if you're ready, willing, and able to take care of these debts, you got to figure out how they arose in cases where the information you get initially when you're denied is very limited.
And Mr. Chairman, I just like to piggyback on that. I know we're short on time, but there was a business that got shut down. He had a health inspection. He got shut down because his business license was expired, not because of the health inspection. So health department shut him down. He went and renewed his business license. He owed clean hands for another business. He paid the $4,000. The system at OTR, you have to wait 3 to 5 days, sometimes even more than that, in order for the system to clear. Once it got cleared, he was flagged for DOES for owing $100. And so he ended up being closed 2 weeks, $20,000 in revenue, lost sales tax. So I agree. The 120 days, as close as we can get to that number, it gives us an opportunity to start, researching exactly what's happening. And it allows for the agencies to communicate with each other to figure out, hey, what exactly is owed besides this 4,000?
Yeah,
I just want to also reiterate real quick, when we had the issue with not being able to obtain the clean hands, again, we were flagged by DOES for a rounding discrepancy between them and our payroll company, so we had no idea. And it was for around $1. We're nowhere near the $100 threshold. All OTR knew was that we were flagged by DOES, and so we were denied our clean hands, but they had no idea which department or what the amount was or how to resolve it. And so what everyone's talking about and the 120 days that you're talking about really comes down to the fact that because we don't have any central database or portal where the agencies can communicate and see what's going on, or where businesses can just log in and see what's happening with their accounts with all these different agencies. I mean, that's really the root, I think, of a lot of these issues.
I appreciate that. I was actually just about to ask you about your thoughts about this central database. I know there are various systems within government that do share information, and I will ask the government witness from the Office of the Chief Financial Officer's office whether or not any system exists to provide that information. But I'll also ask Tiffany Crow, who's the Director of the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, because it seems to make sense. I think one of the challenges that I hear from businesses frequently is they're flagged by the District of Columbia for some issue. That issue prevents them from doing business in the District of Columbia. Their inability to do business keeps them from making money to ultimately address some issue. Again, that could just be a mere $101 or more. And in the case of Sandra Basanti, a rounding error with DOES that slows things down and really keeps people from being able to do business. And so we have to fix this. And I really appreciate you all taking time from running your businesses to provide testimony to this committee. Let us know in your written testimony that we'd love to get for the record if there are other ideas that you have and ways that we can improve this clean hands process in the District of Columbia. So thank you each for your testimony. We're going to turn to our next panel of virtual witnesses, and this should be our last panel before we transition to our government witnesses. If we can have this team migrate over. Gibran Eubanks, Tony Tameldon, Chuck Bradley, Cristobal Hernandez, Jean Hamza, Ruth Gresser, Travis Bally, John Guggenmoos, Jeff Gilbert, Alethea Etnoff. Okay. I think we got a couple more folks to bring over into this panel, but we're going to go ahead and begin, being mindful of time, and I appreciate everybody's patience on this panel. We'll start with Jabron Eubanks. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. You can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Kenny McDuffie, and thank you for the opportunity to testify at this hearing before the Committee on Business and Economic Development. Again, my name is Jabron Eubanks. I'm the political organizer with 1199 SEIU. We represent 400,000 workers across the healthcare continuum up and down the East Coast, with thousands of workers in hospitals, clinics, and skilled nursing facilities in the District of Columbia. We enthusiastically support B25-619, which will exempt occupational and business licenses from DC's Clean Hands requirement, as well as raise the Clean Hands debt threshold from $100 to $2,500. Currently, nearly 20% of district workers must get an occupational license before they can legally do their jobs. We understand that passing this bill will create a more equitable working environment and economy for district residents. DC has the largest Black to white unemployment gap in the nation, and the Clean Hands Law plays a significant role in extending and expanding racial economic disparities in the district. The Clean Hands Law affects more than 48,000 workers, including nurses and social workers, which we represent throughout the region. There is no reason why such hurdles exist in vital workforces who are blatantly understaffed. Nurses and social workers are needed in schools, hospitals, long-term care facilities, and mental health clinics. And we need to be looking at ways to expand the workforce, not deter people from it. A petty fine should not be the reason why we cannot provide our residents with the high quality care that they need and deserve. In DC, the majority of the workers we represent in nursing and the Department of Behavioral Health are women of color. The current Clean Hands policy disproportionately blocks Black residents from receiving their occupational licenses and from starting businesses, which is leaving Black residents impacted by minuscule fines with fewer opportunities to build wealth. This law exacerbates DC's racial inequalities, and its elimination will create pathways to the middle class for many DC residents. Over 69% of DC small businesses are white-owned, compared to just 5.2% of them being Black-owned. Black median household income in DC is around $42,000, less than a third of white median household income of $134,000, and this has remained stagnant for nearly 20 years. We must identify all obstacles interfering with closing the racial equity gap in DC and ensure that they are removed. And in closing, we commend you, Councilmember McDuffie, for introducing this bill. And we understand that by allowing district residents to receive licensure and work in DC, that this will retain workers and create essential opportunities for residents throughout the district. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony, Jabron Eubanks. I don't know that we have it in writing. It was great testimony. We'd love to have you submit that in writing when you get some time.
Will do. Thank you.
All right. Our next witness is Tony Tameldon. Great to have you with the committee this afternoon. Appreciate you taking the time from running your business to speak with us. You can go ahead and begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Tony T. I own the Pug on 8th Street, and I'm partners at Union Trust and Brookland's Finest. I'm also the executive director of CHAMPS, it's the Capitol Hill Association of Merchants and Professionals. It's a local chamber on Capitol Hill, and we've got about 300 members. I would really definitely like to thank Councilmember McDuffie for trying to address some of these issues that small businesses face with Clean Hands, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to testify. Unfortunately, there is no way I'm unique in having clean hand problems. At some point in time, it seems inevitable that every small business owner is going to have to go through it. Please forgive me if I bring up instances that have already been brought up, but that is how it works. I've been delayed several times because I did not file the personal property tax form. And it is definitely my fault for never remembering to file it, but it's always a zero tax dollar due form. And this is the way it generally plays out. I try to get clean hands, it's denied. I look it up, yes, I didn't turn that goddamn form in. Then I wait at least a week for the form to be inputted by OTR. So now not only am I paying a renewal fee, but I got to pay the late fee for a form that I didn't fill out, but owe no money on. It is my fault, but the nature of small businesses, we wear a lot of hats and things like that fall through the cracks. I believe the allotment is $2,500, but any number helps. And just discussing it helps. It's pretty frequent that clean hands are withheld by OTR, but they can't help you clear it. They can tell you a fee is owed to DOES or some other agency, but you have to go through that agency to get it sorted. Then you wait for them to report that clearance back to OTR. Then you wait for the clearance to be inputted, and then you can go ahead. We have to be a jack of all trades. We've got OTR, ABCA, DOES, DOH, DOB, DLCPA, on and on and on. I'm dyslexic, so I screw those letters up all the time. But as far as I know, there are very few resources like a user's manual or an idiot's guide to these agencies to help us navigate it. Compliance checklists and updates for business owners would be a huge help, as would increased communication between and cooperation between the agencies. You know, and just sitting here in this testimony, I forgot how many times somebody tried to get a manager's license to help me run the pug, but they were blocked because they owed money. So they can't get a job, they can't clear the debt. It's that vicious cycle. I've drifted off here. Again, I support any move that can be made. Clearly, I would like for hospitality to be included in this. But thank you again, Councilmember McDuffie, for introducing this, and hopefully we can move forward. And thank you for letting me testify.
And thank you for providing your testimony. A vicious cycle indeed. Next witness is Chuck Bradley. Good afternoon to you. Thanks for joining us. You can begin your testimony.
How everybody doing today, man? My name is Chuck Bradley, and I just want to input on far as Vendors Unite and all the vendors, that it's a struggle out here for all of us trying to be legit in this world. And the loopholes do come, like the brother just said. You know, if we can't pay on the bill, how can we be able to manage and become successful business people? Like he said, there's only 5% Black people that got anything. And it's still hard for us than it is for anyone else to even get any type of license. If we ex-cons and we done changed our life around, how can we sit and say the system work when the system keep trying to take things that we trying to earn and get for ourselves? With the help from the system, we can rebuild ourselves if the system stop beating us and abusing us. We need help from both angles, from the community and the government. And only how that's gonna happen is somewhere down the line, someone gotta swallow their pride. We always swallow ours because we always bow down to y'all because we gotta come to y'all to make something positive happen for us, to make our dreams become true. Won't y'all help us to become successful so we can bring others aboard? You know, and I talked to you when we was at the ice cream shop, and you was a wonderful man, and I believe in everything you're doing, Mr. McDuffie. I just say I love this clean hand stuff, and I think if we keep moving forward with it, it can grow and prosper, and we really can have clean hands out here. It's just like all hands on deck. We quick to go lock somebody up. Let's be quick to save somebody to bring them up. Less incarceration left and less help and love for the people and the foundation of America, period, not just DC. We need this structure all over. Texas, Tennessee, Oklahoma, California, Georgia, Baltimore, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina. We all need help, but we need it more from y'all because we're trying to make our change, which y'all allow us to. Of course, I'm an ex-con, been homeless and everything. But God changed me around, and he can change each and every one of us if you open up to him. And we come together as a team and as a city, we can unite and come and conquer everything. On a positive vibe, may peace and blessings be with each and every one of us. And I hope we all stay successful in keeping our business going and keeping in contact with one another so we can build a better place for us. That's all I have to say. And y'all have a blessed day.
And you do the same, and I appreciate you taking the time to provide that testimony. Really, really important, and for sharing personal story as well. Really helps the committee when we're trying to put a record together to move forward this kind of legislation, to have testimony that represents people like yourself, because you are not unique, and there are a lot of people out there who I know share your story and would love to be able to take the time to provide testimony but can't. So thank you for doing that. We're going to turn to our next witness, Cristobal Hernandez. Good afternoon to you. Okay, I think we do not have Cristobal Hernandez present. How about Jean Hamza?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see you now. Good afternoon to you. You begin your testimony.
Okay. Thank you, Chair McDuffie, for holding this very important hearing. My name is Jean Hamza, and I am the community liaison for IMP, which is the 930 Club, the Atlantis, the Lincoln Theater, and the Anthem. I am also a resident of the District of Columbia for about 40 years, and I am grateful to be here today to offer full support of Bill 25-619, Clean Hands Certification Economic Expansion Amendment Act of 2023. I represent a company that truly strives to always be in compliance and to always do the right thing by the DC government. However, we found that more often than not, OTR seems to work against us and not with us. I can't begin to quantify all of the issues with Clean Hands, but it seems that most of the issues begin with the OTR portal and the lack of interagency communication that results in businesses being told they can't get a Clean Hands certification because they owe another department money. Then the problem gets really bleak because you can't contact anyone at OTR for them to tell you who you need to talk to at the agency you owe money to. And the problem just continues to metastasize until a lawyer is needed. No DC business should have to pay a lawyer just to settle what they owe the city. This legislation is very much needed and enthusiastically welcomed by the business community. It is an excellent first start in helping DC businesses, particularly small businesses, who can't afford a lawyer every time they need a Clean Hands certificate. We hope it is the beginning of a more comprehensive look at OTR and the OTR portal and how OTR can better serve the DC business community. A business should be able to go to one portal to find out what they owe the city. In closing, I'd like to thank you, Councilman McDuffie, for your strong leadership on this matter. This one piece of legislation, while not a panacea, can truly make a difference in DC being a much more business-friendly environment for everyone. Thank you for your time, and I welcome any questions. And I'd like to add a couple of quick addendums to my written testimony, if you don't mind. Thank you. First, we hope this legislation will apply to ABC licensing. 2, we give our full support to the changes to Clean Hands as advocated by Amelia Calma, Director of Research and Policy, DC Policy Center, in her earlier testimony. And finally, in agreement with Andrew Klein, a lawyer, please legislate the lawyers out of the Clean Hands business. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the addenda to your testimony. We'd definitely like to have it in writing and for taking the time to provide testimony this afternoon. Our next witness is Ruth Gresser.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Chairman, for addressing this issue and for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Ruth Gresser, and I'm the owner of Pizzeria Paradiso, the first Neapolitan-style pizza restaurant in Washington, D.C. We've been operating in DC for almost 34 years and have generated well over $10 million in revenue for the district, employing thousands of district residents in the process. We have also always been a responsible and engaged member of the neighborhoods in which we operate and the city community overall. One measure of this is that we always pay all taxes and fees as required and timely. My story around the Clean Hands issue is simple. Present Clean Hands rules disqualified my Georgetown location from receiving a $50,000 pandemic grant due to an inaccurate franchise tax balance showing as outstanding on our OTR account. We were unaware of the outstanding balance, had received no notice of the balance, and the balance was eventually removed from the account because it was charged in error. Unfortunately, this occurred well past the grant deadline. My DuPont Circle and Spring Valley locations received grants. Therefore, without the clean hands disqualification, there's every reason to assume that Georgetown also would have received the $50,000 grant. I've talked with several other business owners who also lost grant funds for this very reason. As you know, every cent counted during the pandemic, as it does even now during this post-pandemic recovery period in which DC restaurant community finds itself. And $50,000 is a lot of cents. The present clean hands system is outdated, both in its threshold and its application. This legislation represents a first step to resolving the ongoing issues that businesses of all kinds have with the restrictions associated with receiving a clean hands certificate. I would like to see the reform expanded to include clean hands requirements as they apply to ABCA licensing and to the process for researching and correcting inaccuracies, which a lot of people have spoken towards. While I believe the bill could be expanded, I fully support the reforming of clean hands requirements through the present bill and urge the council to move forward with passing this legislation.
And thank you very much for your testimony, Ruth Gresser. Really regret hearing that story about the mix-up and the impact that it had on you. But thank you for sharing it. It really helps create our record and really the basis for us trying to do what we want to do in this bill, but also consider the other ways that you and other witnesses have suggested that we enhance this bill to include more areas. So thank you for that. Our next witness is Travis Bally. Good afternoon to you. Really glad that you can join us this afternoon. You can begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chairman, for your time and the committee members. My name is Travis Bally. I am a Ward 7 resident in Randall Highlands, and I'm here today to testify in support of the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023, Bill 25619. I urge the committee to pass the bill as it is currently proposed because the Clean Hands law currently exacerbates DC's racial inequalities, and eliminating Clean Hands prohibition on occupational and small business licenses will create pathways to the middle class for thousands of DC residents. Over 125 occupations and businesses require an occupational or small business license. That represents nearly 1 in 5 DC workers and professions. This includes occupations like hairstylist, which is a position my mom chose and advanced into, eventually becoming a business owner whose increased income, despite not having a college degree, her increased income as a licensed hairstylist paid for me to go to college, the first member of my family to go to college. And my mom's ability to obtain a license and work hard in her profession transformed the economic trajectory of my immigrant family. I wish to highlight the story of one Ward 7 neighbor of mine who has been negatively impacted by the current Clean Hands law, as told in a 2023 report by TSEDEC DC. Stephanie is a Black speech language pathologist in Ward 7 with a master's degree from the University of the District of Columbia. She wants to start her own small business, a speech therapy practice in DC. But under the Clean Hands law, she is not able to because she owes the district fines and fees and late fees for parking and traffic tickets. Stephanie is steadily paying her debt over time. She is responsible and wants to do right, but the district rejected her request to enter into a payment plan, demanding a lump sum upfront that she could not afford. Stephanie notes that in DC, quote, "It is important to have Black therapists to understand linguistically why a student might not verbalize a sentence in the Queen's English, and that is not a disability. You have to look at their culture, their language," end quote. Stephanie recently took a short-term position in North Dakota, When she returns home, she'll only be able to work in Virginia or Maryland, thereby depriving the district of a qualified Black speech language pathologist whose skills are much needed here in DC. Thank you for your time, and please pass Bill 25619 as it's currently proposed.
And thank you so much for your time and your testimony. Our next witness is John Guggenmoos, Chair of the DC Nightlife Council. Good afternoon to you. Glad you could join the committee this afternoon. Look forward to hearing your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman McDuffie. I've submitted my testimony in writing, and since I never, when I read it, always run out of time, I thought, you know what, I'm just going to highlight a few things and just have a conversation with you, hopefully. And the point I want to highlight is how disruptive this process can be when everything has gone wrong. And you've heard over and over again, I mean, I just highlight all the things that have been said, that, the letter just simply says you don't have clean hands. So, that process starts right then. But if, let's just assume a restaurant or one of my bars was closed, just even for a weekend because you couldn't have the proper licensing. Yeah, it's disruptive to me, but what about all of the employees, our staff, the people that live paycheck to paycheck, the bartender or waiter that, has that tipped income? That revenue's gone. It's lost. The sales tax revenue is lost for the district over sometimes just a minor fine. So, the things that I really hope to stress that we look at is the notification system. There has to be a better notification system through My Tax, DC. There, just to inform people of what it is they owe, or before you suddenly wake up and are surprised. I want to just make sure that liquor licenses are exempt from that licensing procedure. That, the scope, I think you already addressing the scope of the fines and the exempting certain business licenses, but really specifying that liquor licenses are part of that, because it's obviously a massive part of our nighttime community. And if you just think back, as I'm expanding right now and going through the expense of it, when a new business opens up, you've spent everything, your savings, you've borrowed money from family. And so getting behind, even as you open up, you don't have the money to hire an attorney, or that, you only use your accountant right when you're filing those fees. You just don't have the resources to help research, and even the most well-intended operator can find themselves behind. So having just a set payment plan, just like they do in San Francisco, has to be an option the district can look at. Those are the main points, and I only have a few seconds left. So you'll encourage me to always just just to talk with you conversationally instead of reading my testimony. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer it, but you've heard the issues loud and clear today.
Indeed, we have heard the issues loudly and clearly, and really appreciate you adding to the list of issues with your testimony. We're going to turn next to Jeff Gilbert. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. You can begin your testimony. You have 3 minutes.
Your Chairperson McDuffie and the Committee on Business and Economic Development, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Jeff Gilbert. I'm the Legal and Technical Assistance Director at Beloved Community Incubator, a DC area worker self-directed nonprofit that incubates cooperatives and organizes workers' campaigns, including the campaign to decriminalize street vending in DC and the Excluded Worker Coalition. This isn't the first time we've needed to come to the council to reform the Clean Hands Law. Previous efforts include the amnesty program, part of the recent transformation of DC's street vending laws, the Street Vendor Advancement Amendment Act of 2023, and the efforts led by our colleagues with CBED DC to stop enforcing the Clean Hands Law against residents applying to obtain or renew a driver's license. Yet significant reforms are still needed in general for more workers in DC, and in particular with respect to street vendors. Beloved Community Incubator, the organization where I'm a co-director, led the effort to create the amnesty program, part of the new street vending law. The amnesty program removes clean hands barriers to obtaining a new license for vendors with debt from vending-related civil fines and unpaid vending minimum quarterly sales tax dating back to 2010. Vendors are able to make use of the amnesty program through October 1st, 2028, 5 years after the new law went into effect. Yet still, many street vendors we know are barred from even applying for a license under the new law
by the clean hands requirement. Many vendors have other debts with the city, like parking and speeding tickets, well in excess of $100 that are not eligible for the amnesty program. In addition, many vendors have been assessed fines for vending infractions or have been charged minimum quarterly sales tax since the effective date of the new law, which was October 1st, 2023, which means that these debts are not eligible for the amnesty program. Most, if not all, vendors who have been assessed fines and charged minimum quarterly sales tax since the effective date of the new law have not been able to even complete applications for licenses under the new law because the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection and or the Department of Health have not yet fully implemented key aspects of the new law. I share this to make clear that even in the case of the new street vending law, which included a specific amnesty provision to remove clean hands barriers, the clean hands law remains an obstacle for many vendors to even apply for a street vending license. The reforms being discussed today would positively impact thousands of DC workers financially, which would also benefit the district, as you've heard from many witnesses today. Over 125 occupations and businesses require an occupational or small business license, representing nearly 1 in 5 DC workers and professions. So we fully support removing occupational and business licenses from the clean hands requirement and raising the clean hands threshold up to $2,500, really as high as you will go. We don't think that this is a barrier that it makes sense to remain in place. Also just want to note that the clean hands status quo effectively acts as a tax on poverty and exacerbates DC's racial inequalities. So we appreciate that the council has considered and begun to take significant action to remove clean hands barriers in the past. The reforms being discussed today will be an important step forward, and we really, really need the council to continue to act to remove many of the clean hands barriers that remain. Thank you for your time.
And thank you for your time this afternoon in providing testimony to the committee. Our final public witness for this virtual panel is Alethea Etnoff. Good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us. You can begin your testimony. All right. Actually, I don't think the person was able to join us this afternoon. I don't have questions necessarily of this panel. I do appreciate and think it's worth reiterating sort of the theme that I've heard from public witnesses in terms of the urgency that exists to reform our clean hands law. Also recognizing, I think, while important, the strides the committee was able to make in this year's budget, assuming that it passes in the BSA next week, but recognizing that it really falls far from where we need to go and how we need to reform this clean hands law. I will note, again, some of the themes around the notification system and the fact that people are only finding out about issues with clean hands at the time of, for example, renewal of a license. I'll note the desire of a number of witnesses to have the committee expand the bill to include the renewal of ABACA licenses. I'll also note what I heard from a number of witnesses, namely, and I think her testimony was lifted up by other witnesses as well, but Amelia Kama, DC Policy Center, laying out 3 crystal clear bullets, one of which explained the need to have clean hands notifications clearly state, how much, which agency or agencies are referenced, and just really give people a clear path to how to resolve an issue quickly and not have a minor debt turn into a huge issue with businesses or individuals that precludes them from, getting some sort of certification or license or renewing a business license, which then has, really serious downstream consequences for that business, for the individuals that the owner employs, and all the folks who otherwise would patronize that business and provide the types of revenues that our city sorely needs today. And so I really appreciate all the public witnesses from taking time out of their schedules to provide in-person testimony and virtual testimony for this bill. And I look forward to working with a number of you directly, as we have in the past, to try to really move this forward. So thank you to all the public witnesses who had the opportunity to testify. I'm now going to turn to two government witnesses who are going to appear before the committee. If we could have Tiffany Crow, Director of the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection, come forward, as well as William Bowie, Senior Counsel with the Office of Tax and Revenue within the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. And if you both wouldn't mind raising your right hand so I can swear you in before we get started, I would appreciate that. Do you, it's up to you. You want to have a seat, Mr. Bowie? All right. I know you officer of the court and probably used to standing while you do this. So if you could raise your right hands, do you each swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you very much. I'm going to turn to Director Crowe first for your testimony. Thanks for joining us again. If you could just hit the button at the base of your mic, thanks.
Thank you for having me. And in light of all the testimony today, I will be revising my written testimony for the record. And before I get started, Mr. Bowie and I have had many conversations over the years in my various capacities in different agencies about clean hands. And so I look forward to working with them further.
Great.
Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie, committee members, and staff. I'm Tiffany Crow, the Director of the Department of Licensing and Consumer Protection at DLCP. I am here today to testify regarding B250619, the Clean Hands Certification, Economic Expansion, and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023. DLCP strongly supports the intent of this bill, and we believe the changes proposed will help more people to acquire licensure in the District of Columbia. Before an individual applies for a business or occupational license at DLCP or renews one, they must obtain a Clean Hands certificate from the Office of Tax and Revenue. Currently, if a prospective business owner enters a payment plan and is compliant with that plan, they cannot be denied a license or a certificate. We want licensees to be aware of and have the opportunity to resolve any existing financial issues. We do know that debt exacerbates the challenges that come with operating a business or occupation in several ways. And for certain business types, it is worth noting that applicants are required to furnish a bond, sometimes in the tens of thousands. In some cases, outstanding debt can make this bond unaffordable. If this bill passes, we recommend incorporating additional support for prospective, new, and existing business owners to understand and manage their finances. Being on sound financial footing is vital to a business longevity, something that we are tracking closely in the district at this time. We want our businesses and occupations to be financially sound so that they can be successful. We are working with our partners inside and outside of government to build and expand these supports. As DLCP is one of two agencies that every DC business must touch, for the past several months, we have worked to strengthen our connection with OTR, including integrating Clean Hands status into the new enterprise business portal at business.dc.gov. Changes we would like to see along with the implementation of this bill and have continuously lobbied our OCFO colleagues for is the ability for business owners to see through our portal the source and the amount of the debt owed. I believe our colleagues at OTR believe they do not currently have the legal authority to share this information with our agency, so additional support for OTR as they seek to improve transparency would be help for us all. If this bill passes, we want to make sure that people can see their debts clearly and make arrangements to pay them while they operate their business. And I'll go off the script for a minute to say, I don't think I heard one person today say they didn't want to pay their debts. I think, which is worth noting, and that's been our experience as an agency. People a lot of times are taken by surprise. They're just trying to keep their business going or get started. And so we work with them to try to get as much information as we can and have like done trainings with OTR so that we understand their process. And in the interim, while we await the updates to this bill and its passage, we will continue to do that. And anyone who testified today who is still having an issue can feel free to contact our agency. So thank you so much for your advocacy on behalf of district businesses and for letting me testify today.
And thank you for your testimony this afternoon. William Bowie, good afternoon to you. You can begin your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I'm William Bowie, Senior Counsel for the Office of Tax and Revenue. I want to thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony on behalf of OTR on Bill 25-619, the Clean Hands Economic Expansion and Revitalization Amendment Act of 2023. OTR's role in the Clean Hands process is to maintain the platform by which the district licensing and permitting agencies may check primarily for tax delinquencies, whether that agency should certify clean hands and grant the applicant a license or permit. The Clean Hands Before Receiving a License or Permit Act of 1996, Law 11-118, established the Clean Hands process and required that an applicant for a license or permit have no outstanding debt of more than $100 owed to the district government as a result of fines, penalties, or as a result of past due taxes. The bill would change the existing threshold of $100 to $2,500. OTR is prepared to implement the bill as drafted and work with the affected agencies. OTR suggests that the committee contact those agencies that have the responsibility to grant licenses and permits for businesses to operate in the district to comment on the impact the legislation will have on their operations. OTR has concerns about the bill's impact on tax compliance since it may incentivize individuals and businesses to forego paying taxes up to the proposed $2,500 threshold. This revision to the Clean Hands law has the ability to change taxpayer behavior. Raising the threshold to $2,500 could cause taxpayers who voluntarily pay their tax obligations in full to partially pay them in the future. For decades, the Clean Hands law has been used in the district as a compliance tool to hold taxpayers accountable to pay their fair share of taxes owed to the district. In addition, this policy change will shift the administrative burden of collecting the remaining tax debt under the new threshold to OTR. This administrative burden will result in the agency having to send more billing letters, increased enforcement actions, and penalty and interest charges for taxpayers who fail to pay in full and on time. Moreover, the bill's fiscal impact, as estimated by the OCFO's Office of Revenue Analysis, will cost the district $4.3 million in the first year of implementation and upwards of $18 million over the financial plan. I thank you for the opportunity to testify and happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. And a few questions, actually. And if I could have the written testimony, you may have already provided it.
Yes.
But I don't have it handy right now. I just want to make sure I put that on the record. I would love to explore a little bit about a concern raised by a number of the public witnesses today on this bill, but also testimony raised by Director Crow regarding the notification that an individual business receives around Clean Hands, telling them that there's an issue and the desire to understand better the source and the amount of whatever the debt is so that it provides clearly to the person what the issue is and gives them a sense of how to quickly resolve it. Is there anything that prevents you all from doing that, or are there any potential hurdles that you all see? Why hasn't this been done in the past?
I'll address that. As Director Crow knows, when we've had this discussion, there are tax confidentiality issues in terms of what we can and cannot disclose to other agencies in terms of a taxpayer's tax liability. Statutorily, we're prevented from disclosing certain tax information, as well as agreements we have with IRS in terms of what tax information that we can disclose. So that's the primary issue.
Is that the only time where you don't disclose it? Is if it's a tax issue? Because there are other types of issues or debts that might arise that aren't specifically,
Well, OTO only deals with tax issues.
okay. So the only time something would be, that would come before OTR is if it's a tax issue. Does it matter what kind of tax issue?
I'm not clear. I mean, any tax issue in terms of individual income, business taxes, those are
So
within the
let's
purview.
back up for a second then. Can you explain for folks who might be at home listening, like, at what point does OTR get involved where a person receives a clean hands notice, letting them know that they can't get a particular occupational license or renew a business license?
Okay. How the process works is several agencies, APCA, other agencies have access to our Clean Hands database. So they can check on the front end to see if a taxpayer has a particular tax issue. Other than that, the taxpayer has access to our My Tax portal where they can check 24 hours, 7 days a week, morning or night to check their own tax liability. So that's another option that they have to check if there's an outstanding tax due that might impact their clean hands. Additionally, we send out multiple notices to taxpayers to alert them that they have tax issues, and that should alert them that they may have a tax clean hands issue when their license becomes due.
So I can speak as a customer of this process. So right now we can see it's binary. We can see yes, no, like a person either has clean hands or they don't. And so what happens for businesses in a lot of cases, and you heard that from the testimony today, is they will log into My Tax. And as far as I know right now, if your issue is a DOES issue, whatever it is, first source, whatever the issue is, if your DOES issue is what's keeping you from getting clean hands, that may not show up in My Tax.
Can you answer, let me stop you for a second. Can you answer that question? If the issue is with DOES or DMV or some other agency that's not originating from a tax issue,
Yeah.
does it show up in My Tax?
When the person goes onto My Tax, they can self-certify themselves and get a clean hand certificate. On the clean hand certificate, if they're denied, if they're being denied, it will show if it's a tax issue, as well as if there's a DOE issue, and it provides a telephone number that they can call DOES to find out what that tax issue is specifically.
But only if it's a DOES tax issue.
Correct. We do not do any certifications for DMV. We've never done any tax issue, clean hands denials for DMV. We do not receive their debt data, so we don't do clean hands for DMV.
Do you do it for any other agencies?
Other agencies, like I said, APCA, DOH, DLCP have access to our database where they can check on their own to determine whether or not there will be a tax issue.
So who has to check it? You said they can check on their own. Who's the they in that?
Whoever is administratively handling clean hands in their agency can go online and have access.
What if it's me as a customer
Well,
looking
you
at
can
my
log
tax?
into your My Tax portal
Yep.
and on your own and check and see if you have a tax issue.
Right, and I see that I have a tax issue, I guess. I see that I'm being denied. Does it show me the agency where the issue?
Well, if it's an OTR issue, there's a number that you can call with an OTR to find out specifically. Our customer service in general will answer the questions as to what the specific tax issue, whether it's a collection issue, audit issue, that when you call in, we can tell you specifically what that, where.
Okay. What if it's a DLCP or an APCA issue or some other agency that you mentioned earlier?
Well, again, those agencies have access to our database.
I understand that, but let me, I'm the customer. I don't know what they have access to. I'm trying to figure out what my issue is. What do I see? Do I see that it's an APCA issue? Do I see
No,
that
we
it's
do not get debt data from APCA. We don't get debt data from DOH. They have access to our database to conduct the clean hands checks, but in terms of getting their debt data to populate a clean hand certificate, we do not get that information.
But how do I know that the issue is with APCA or DOH or DLCP? I'm looking at My Tax. and I see that I've been denied a clean hands.
Right, we will only tell you if you have a tax issue. We can't tell you if you have an APCA issue.
Well, I mean, technically, you don't just tell me if it's a tax issue, right? You tell me it would tell me that I'm denied a clean hands, right?
No, not
It
on my
doesn't?
tax. It does not do that.
Oh, okay.
So for agencies that use their database, it's a limited set of information that OTR believes they have the legal authority to share with us, and it's yes or no. And so for customers, what they have to do and what the folks testifying were saying is then they have to go to OTR's website, My Tax. They've got to look and see what the issue is through My Tax. And there are some limitations in terms of details that folks testified. Now, I will say that Roddy Skipworth, who is the director of OTR right now, is working on that. He's bringing ideas from other areas. He wants it to be more transparent. But for now, one thing that we are hoping for in the future is that there is just one place that someone can go to see what it is that they owe, how much, and to whom. It was a big win for us to be able in the business portal to be able to say yes or no. They agreed, we signed an agreement to be able to show that information as part of the licensing process. And so we're hoping this and other reforms will help evolve that.
Okay. So are any of y'all familiar with like systems in Maryland or Virginia, or whether this is an issue there as well?
So I can speak to, like, in terms of the business community. I think earlier someone testified that DC is the only state that does this. That's not true. So in most states, they do have some sort of like tax compliance requirement.
Yeah. I think in some states though, I think with some of them have testified to that it is certainly if it's a tax issue, that it'll keep you from getting the certification similar to a clean hands in the District of Columbia, but that ours is so expansive. It includes a lot of other things, occupational license.
Complicated here.
Okay.
And there are states where you only have to register with the tax to start your business. They're mostly concerned with your taxes.
Right.
Like they want you to file with the tax
Taxes,
office.
child support, I think is another thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so that is the key difference here. And we believe that there are pretty simple ways to make it more straightforward for business owners and customers. The law just has to support it.
Okay. So is there any way that when businesses are registering or anything they have to do with OTR, that they can waive whatever federal requirement that you cite, Mr. Boyd, as an issue for you sharing information to sister agencies? Is there any way that you can get around, and I don't mean circumventing, but I mean, is there any way that you can account for the federal requirement such that it allows the sharing of information, which makes it easier for people to be able to identify what their clean hands issue is and get it rectified?
Well, I mean, in terms of the federal information, no, we have certain requirements under the MOU with IRS as to what we can and cannot disclose. So we are kind of handicapped in terms of what taxpayer information we can disclose outside of the agency. Now, of course, when a taxpayer contacts us, if they have a power of attorney that authorizes us to discuss with them on behalf of their client what their tax issues are, we can disclose their DC tax information. And to the degree we know what their federal tax issue is, I guess we can direct them to IRS to find out if they have what their federal tax issue is.
Since it seems like one of the greatest challenges to trying to establish some sort of central database that allows for the sharing of information, it rests with OTR in the Office of the Chief Financial Officer. Is there any way then that DLCP and other agencies, APCA perhaps, could work with your office, Mr. Boyd, so that you are sort of the central repository, the place where a database might exist that is one stop for people to be able to log in, see the issues impacting them, whether it's a tax issue or some issue with DLCP or APCA or DOH?
The law as written does have a provision in it that allows us to maintain the database for agencies to submit their tax data. or their agency data, their debt data. So the law is there that allows for those agencies to submit their information. I will say several of the agencies are reticent about providing us that information. So, and we've approached them multiple times about getting some of that information without success. But the law as written does allow for us to maintain the information for other agencies that we can implement into part of the clean hands requirement.
Oh, go ahead, please.
And I would say if operationally, that is something that would happen through law or voluntary participation by agencies, the back half of that work is transmitting that information to the agencies that have to issue licenses. So whether that's APCA or DLCP is probably the biggest sort of customer for this. We're the elephant in the room here, because we would love for people to just be able to come to us, get their license. If they don't have clean hands, they can see exactly why not. And that can be done technologically with integrations that allow us to share the information. But that is more where the barrier is right now, is even if the information lives here with OTR, being able to integrate our systems and share it. We have the technological ability and even the funding now to do it. It's more, we want to make sure that the Office of Tax and Revenue is comfortable legally and with their agreements to share that with us so that people can see it, pay it, make payment arrangements, which is a really important thing that people have to know. They can just make a payment arrangement and then move on and get their license. So.
Got it. Thank you for that. There were some suggestions that the law be amended to allow for sort of a period before the debt becomes overdue for the purpose of denying a clean hands. In other words, I think in Virginia, there's a 90-day period. In Maryland, there's a 120-day period that would allow for any issues to perhaps be resolved before an applicant would be denied a clean hands. Understanding there are financial implications, is there any opposition to changing the law to allow for something like that if the funding is there to pay for it?
From our perspective, again, whatever the council implements, we'll implement it. However, there will probably be some fiscal impact with that we'd have to
I imagine it would be. Yeah, I imagine it would be. Any policy or reason to oppose something like that, Director Crowe?
I think operationally, it would be really important to understand how other states that are doing this successfully have implemented those checkbacks. So if you set it for 180 days or 360 even, what is it that is the trigger to let us know for each of those plans when they're due? Now, I think the payment arrangement requirement is one where, then that's something they're already, an agreement they already would have with the Office of Tax and Revenue. Office of Tax and Revenue already has things in place if someone is not compliant with their payment arrangement. And so I would encourage you, as we seek to find solutions to this, to think about what's already in place and strengthen those or make them easier for businesses. So from our agency's perspective, we don't have any objection to not making clean hands the threshold for getting your license. I think for longevity of businesses, we would want to make sure that they understand how lingering tax debt can impact a business, can impact their families, can impact kind of other things. But as long as there's an understanding about the operational component, we don't object.
Right. No, I appreciate that, but I also appreciate the testimony provided earlier where I believe you, and I'm paraphrasing here, said something to the effect of you didn't hear any of the public witnesses say that they don't want to pay their debts.
Right.
Right? I think in some cases, they're surprised to know that they have some outstanding debt or liability to the district that prevents them from getting the clean hands. And it's only when they find out that the scramble begins, all the while they're still trying to run their small business. And so thinking about some period, some buffer that would allow them to receive the notice that they have an outstanding debt to the district, but then also time to rectify that between the agencies that could help resolve the issue without preventing them from continuing their operations and their ability to make money and keep people employed, and sort of trying to prevent negative collateral consequences when they receive the notice that they have a clean hands. And speaking of that, there was some suggestion that a lot of the people who run into issues with clean hands are surprised to find out that the issue exists. Have you all thought about any particular way to provide notice in advance? And I'm not even sure the best way to ask that question. Did you all hear that part of the testimony from some of the witnesses? And do you understand what that issue
So you
is?
mean like at renewal time? So this isn't a, we are more the problem here in terms of when people go to renew their license. We know when your license is set to renew. So theoretically, if we could get OTR to agree, we could run a check at renewal time to see if those people have clean hands so that they are flagged in advance. Now, that's not something we would be able to implement tomorrow, but to your question about whether or not there's anything we can do to enhance the process to increase the likelihood that people are not surprised, from our end, we can do that. I believe OTR sends out notices and things, and Mr. Bowie can speak to that, but.
Sure.
Yeah, and as I mentioned earlier, we send out at least 3 notices to taxpayers that have a delinquency, so they're aware of their tax debt. Additionally, as I said, through the My Tax portal, they can check their tax situation 24 hours, 7 days a week, far in advance of when their license is due to be renewed, to find out, to be proactive, to find out if they do have a tax issue. I'll also add with APCA, we have on occasion gotten their license renewal cycles in advance and done checks in advance to find out which taxpayers prospectively will have a tax issue. And then those we will focus on to send out notices and to reach out to them to try and get them in compliance in advance of their renewal date. So I'm not quite clear what else we could do to let a taxpayer know that they have a tax delinquency if they want to find out if they have a tax delinquency.
I mean, I'll perhaps, once we have a chance to go through more of the testimony we got today, we might have some suggestions about what would be most helpful to some of these folks in terms of notification in advance of renewals, et cetera. One of the witnesses, I think it was maybe Michael Johnson from DC Fiscal Policy Institute, mentioned that the OCFO's fiscal impact statement process is flawed, and that, not the process, but the actual FIS, I think, relevant to this bill, and in the analysis that was performed, in that the CCU collections post the 2021 law show only modest financial impact. Have you had opportunity to assess how that law affected projected debt and tax collections?
No, we'd have to go, we'd have to get the information and we can run it and see what their basis was for their analysis and see where, if there is any flaw in what they're doing.
Okay,
Get
we'd
back
love to
to
be
you.
able to work with you to have a sense of whether or not that's accurate. So I appreciate that. I really appreciate both of you representing your respective agencies and providing testimony and answering the committee's questions. Are there any other agencies that you think would be relevant to a follow-up conversation that we might have to try to address some of these issues?
Well, as I mentioned, DOH
Okay.
with the professional licensing.
Okay. APCA maybe?
APCA.
Okay.
That's it.
And I think we, in our written testimony, mentioned that there is some clarity needed around how this bill applies to the health professions. And I think the testimony from the witnesses today supported that as well.
Okay. All right. I don't have any additional questions. I do look forward to following up based on the testimony you all provided and some of the exchanges we had today. Is there anything else either of you would like to add to the record before we move on to our next measure? No, sir.
I don't
Thank you
think
very
so.
much. Appreciate your
Thank you so
time.
much.
The next measure on the committee's agenda this afternoon is Bill 25-658, which is the Housing and Downtown Tax Abatement Technical Amendment Act of 2024, which Chairman Mendelson introduced on January 4th, 2024, at the request of the mayor. The bill was referred to the Committee on Business and Economic Development on January 9th, 2024. As introduced, the bill would make technical changes to the Housing and Downtown Tax Abatement Program previously enacted by council to incentivize office to residential conversions. The changes include clarifying that the Housing and Downtown Program is a competitive one rather than a first come, first served program, specifying how the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act first sale exemptions is to be recorded, and adding flexibility of timing between the conditional approval of the tax abatement and the issuance of the final certificate of occupancy. Council passed corresponding emergency and temporary versions of this permanent bill in January earlier this year, and the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development issued regulations thereafter. We're going to turn to our public witness, but have been informed that they're not able to testify virtually this afternoon, but did provide written testimony, which the committee intends to incorporate into the record. There were not any government witnesses for this particular measure, so we'll make sure that the witness testimony provided in writing will be incorporated to record. If there are any other witnesses who wish to provide testimony in writing, we encourage them to do so, so we have it included in the record before the record closes for that measure. The next measure on the committee's agenda this afternoon is proposed resolution 25-804, the American Association of Colleges and Universities Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024. This measure was introduced on May 13th, 2024 by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor and referred to the committee on June 11th, 2020. This isn't right. I'm sorry. This was introduced on May 13th, 24. Let me start that again. This measure was introduced on May 13, 2024 by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor and referred to the committee on June 11, 2024. If approved, this measure would authorize the issuance, sale, and delivery in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $12 million. These bonds will be used for the financing, refinancing, or reimbursing of costs incurred by the American Association of Colleges and Universities for its projects located at 1816 and 1818 R Street Northwest in Ward 2. We're going to turn to our public witnesses who have joined us virtually this afternoon. And we've got 3 witnesses who've signed up. I don't imagine each of you will be testifying, so I'll turn to you and allow the witness to begin their testimony. You'll have 3 minutes, and thanks for joining us this afternoon. Who's going to be testifying on behalf of the association this afternoon?
That's me,
Great.
Chairperson McDuffie. My name is Melvina Norrie Thomas. Thank you so much. I'm the Vice President of Human Resources, Facilities, and Administration for the American Association of Colleges and Universities. And with me today, we have our counsel, Sean Glenn, Errant Shift, LLP. I'm here today on behalf of the association's request that the District of Columbia approve the issuance of a $10 million in tax-exempt revenue bonds issued for the association. The association intends to use the proceeds of the proposed bonds to finance cost of the renovations of our headquarters facility located at 1816 and 1818 R Street, Northwest Washington, D.C. AACU, the American Association of Colleges and Universities, was founded in 1915 and present and active in the district's community since 1959. The association has served as an umbrella organization focusing on structural advancement of colleges and universities. The association provides extensive resources that supports its members in breaking down institutional silos and shaping and sharing solutions to challenges facing education. In doing so, the association produces an array of publications regarding institutional transformation on campus, including an award-winning magazine, peer-reviewed journals, and a collection of guidebooks to inform and supplement member-driven endeavors. Through its service, the association leads the development of the democratic purposes of higher education by promoting equity, innovation, and excellence in liberal education. Having a headquarters in the diplomatic heart of the nation, the association continues to garner membership for the educational institutions in the district across the United States and internationally. Annually, the association brings colleges and university leaders to the district to shape policy and provide solutions for higher education sector. Last year, the association held its annual meeting over the course of several days in which 1,350 educators gathered to unpack common challenges in higher education and showcase successful models of instructional transformation and best practices. This year, the association will have the Transformational STEM Higher Education Conference and also a Global Learning Conference that will both be held locally. These conferences each scheduled for several days, and the association expects 1,100 attendees at these events. The association respectfully requests that the district approve the issuance of the bonds in a principal amount of $10 million. The bonds, of course, would not constitute any direct or indirect financial burden, risk, debt, or liability to the district, government, or its citizens. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you for your testimony. I appreciate that. Just a couple questions so that the record for this measure is clear. That I'll ask before we move on to our government witness for this measure. I don't believe it's the first time, but you all have used the bond program. Is it the first time you've used the bond program?
Yes.
It is, okay. Well, we appreciate that. What led you to explore financing through the district's bond program?
Being a higher ed and nonprofit association and a membership-based organization itself, and our revenue is the direct reflection of our member base. So the DC bond program was appropriate.
All right, and is this your headquarters? You are headquartered here in the District of Columbia?
Yes, at 1816 and 1818 R Street in DuPont Circle.
Okay, well, we welcome you to use this program, and we also welcome other institutions, educational institutions in particular, who may be interested in establishing a presence in the district as well. And the DC Revenue Bond Program is a great resource for nonprofits who may need capital financing for projects here in the nation's capital. Did you all have a public hearing with DMPIT? Did you mention that in your testimony?
No.
You did not? Okay, I'll ask DMPIT about that. And is Sean Glenn, did you mention it is borrowers counsel?
Yes, he is.
Okay, and Mr. Glenn, what's the firm you're with?
I'm with Aaron Fox.
Oh, you're with Aaron, okay.
And Tiber Hudson is bond counsel, Earl Horton.
Okay. Have you all had any need to engage with the community on this? Any involvement of the ANC, any civic association presence, Any responses relevant to that?
Yes, we actually had an open house and we also engaged with the ANC. And so those two things were done, I want to say over 9 months ago.
Any expressed support or opposition by the ANC or any other civic organizations?
There was full support by the ANC and also by our neighbors on our street and 1818 100 block of our street as well.
Okay, and when do you all anticipate, assuming this passes the committee, when would you anticipate closing?
July 19th, hopefully.
Got it. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions. Anything else you'd like to add to the record before I turn to our government witnesses?
No, we think this would be a true benefit for the city. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for your testimony. And if you haven't already, if you could provide your testimony in writing, we would appreciate it. All right, I'm going to turn now to our government witnesses for this measure, PR 25-804. And before I hear from you, if you could raise your right hand so I can swear you in. Do you each swear or affirm under penalty of law that the testimony you're about to provide to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Let the record reflect that they have responded affirmatively, and I will now turn to you for your testimony. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am Anthony Hatton. I serve as project manager in the DC Revenue Bond Program, a function within the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. I am testifying today to request on behalf of the American Association of Colleges and Universities that the council approve the issuance of District of Columbia revenue bonds through the American Association of Colleges and Universities. The proposed revenue bond issuance would be in one or more series in an amount not to exceed 12 million. American Association of Colleges and Universities has requested that the District of Columbia issue up to 12 million of District of Columbia revenue bonds in one or more series to authorize and provide for the loan of the proceeds of the bonds to assist American Association of Colleges and Universities in financing, refinancing, or reimbursing of costs associated with an authorized project pursuant to Section 490 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. The bonds, if issued, will be secured by a general obligation of the American Association of Colleges and Universities and will be without recourse to the District of Columbia. Based upon the information set forth in the application, the Revenue Bond Program staff has determined that the proposed project complies with criteria for approval of a proposed financing transaction through the District of Columbia Revenue Bond Program. Additionally, the proposed project will promote education, trade and commerce, enhance employment opportunities, and contribute to community betterment. This concludes my testimony. I'm available to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Haddon. Just a couple of questions that I'm sure you anticipated, in fact, have referenced some of them in your testimony, but I'd like to ask them at the risk of being redundant, just so that our record is clear. How do you understand what do you understand to be the proposed timeline to complete this project?
The borrower expects to close and would like to close sometime around mid-July, July 19th to be more specific.
Okay, and have you explained to the applicant that these bonds are not the district's liabilities?
Yes, sir.
Okay, have you determined that the borrower is a qualified applicant under the applicable district requirements?
Yes, sir.
Have you determined that the bonds will be used to finance a project that is authorized to receive funding through the District of Columbia?
Yes, sir.
Is the borrower able to service the debt resulting from the proposed financing in your estimation?
Yes, sir.
And I'll ask you, even though the previous witness mentioned it, but who did DenPet use as bond counsel on this project?
Bond counsel, we're using Tiber Hudson.
Got it. Thank you very much. I don't have anything else that I'd like to ask at this time. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the record before we move to the next measure?
No, sir. Thank you very much for allowing us to testify.
And thank you very much for your testimony. The next measure on the committee's agenda is proposed resolution 25-805, the Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024, which was introduced on May 13th, 2024 by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor and referred to the committee on June 11th, 2024. If approved, this measure would authorize the issuance, sale, and delivery in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $3,250,000. These bonds would be used for the financing, refinancing, or reimbursing of costs incurred by Jubilee Housing for its project located at 1474 Columbia Road Northwest in Ward 1. I'm going to turn first to our public witness. I understand that James Knight, who's the president and CEO of Jubilee Housing, had an emergency and is not able to appear virtually before the committee today, but that Evram Fetcher, managing director with Equity Plus, is actually not present. So we're going to put this measure on hold and maybe think about rescheduling it since none of the witnesses are present. We're going to move to the next measure on the committee's agenda, which is PR 25-850, the Washington Latin Public Charter School Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024, which was introduced on June 6, 2024 by Chairman Mendelson at the request of the mayor and referred to the committee on June 11, 2024. If approved, this measure would authorize the issuance, sale, and delivery in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $55 million. These bonds would be used to refinance Washington Latin Public Charter School's 2021 bonds and for the financing of the development of the school's second campus at 4301 Harewood Road Northeast in Ward 5. I'm going to now call the public witnesses for this measure, who I believe are present. Oh, they are already present. Okay, great. If we could turn to our virtual witnesses. Good afternoon to each of you. Thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. I know we have 3 witnesses here, and so I'll turn to you all to have the person who plans to testify to go ahead and do so. You will have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. My name is Giovanna Turieta. I'm the Chief Financial Officer for the Washington Latin School, a DC public charter school incorporated in 2005. We currently have 2 campuses, the Second Street campus at 5200 Second Street Northwest, and the Cooper campus at 4301 Harewood Road Northeast in Washington, DC. The Cooper campus operations are currently taking place at a leased facility located at 711 Edgewood Street Northeast, while the campus is developed with the proceeds of the bonds we are requesting the district to issue on our behalf today. With me today are the school's treasurer, Elizabeth Paisner, and Sean Glenn, our counsel from Aaron Fox. Washington Latin is a liberal arts college preparatory middle school and high school with a mission to provide a challenging classical education that is accessible to all students across DC. I am on behalf of the school I am here on behalf of the school to request that the district approve the issuance of up to $55 million of tax-exempt District of Columbia revenue bonds to help the school complete its expansion project, which consists of the following elements. First, the refunding of the District of Columbia Revenue Bond Series 2020 originally issued in the amount of $14,500,000, which were used to acquire and renovate the Second Street campus. Second, the refinancing of a 2022 bank loan, the proceeds of which were used to acquire the Cooper campus. And third, the further development and expansion of the Cooper campus. Through the development and expansion of the Cooper campus, we will be able to make a high quality education accessible to more DC residents. Academic accessibility is not only one of the school's core principles, but it is also the legacy of the Cooper campus namesake, Dr. Anna Julia Cooper, who was born into slavery in 1858 and went on to become a champion for equity and education for both African Americans and women. Since the opening of the Cooper campus, we have strived to honor Dr. Cooper's legacy by providing a leading education to DC's diverse residents. The school has been an active participant in the DC community since it began in 2005. For the 23-24 school year, the school enrolled about 1,036 students in 5th through 12th grades and employs around 205 people, about 60% of which are district residents. We just recently graduated our 13th senior class. With the renovations made possible by bond financing, we expect to meet our full enrollment of approximately 1,465 students in both campuses by the 28-29 school year. There's a strong demand among DC parents for our unique approach to a holistic education that emphasizes the importance of character and personal development. By approving the issuance of the bonds, the Council will greatly assist in supporting our mission of educating DC children and support Dr. Cooper's legacy of promoting accessibility in education. The school respectfully requests that the district approve the issuance of the bonds on its behalf. The bonds, of course, would not constitute a debt or liability of the district, and the bonds would be repaid solely by the school. We thank you for your consideration.
And thank you very much for your testimony this afternoon. Just a couple of follow-up questions that may be slightly redundant, but for the purpose of establishing a record for this matter. In your testimony, you stated that the funds in part to refinance older debt and to further develop and expand the Cooper campus. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Approximately how many students are currently enrolled in that campus?
This year we had 1,036 students enrolled in the whole school.
It's 1,000 and
36 students.
got it. Okay. And then what approximately might your enrollment be after the Cooper campus is expanded?
So we plan to have approximately 735 students in each campus. So that's about 1,435 students about in the year 2020, after the school is, the enrollment is out capacity.
Thank you for that. Your organization has used the district's revenue bond program before. Have you been satisfied with your experience working with the program?
Yes, we are very grateful to the district for having issued bonds for to secure and refinance the loans of our first campus, because it has given us the access to an accessible interest rate to finance the cost of our facilities. And we hope that we have a second chance.
Got it. And I noticed in your testimony, you referred to the refinancing a bank loan from 2022. And I'm curious about whether there's a reason you sought bank financing instead of the DC Revenue Bond program in 2022.
In 2022, we had the interest rates were very accessible, and then we had a very good deal that was presented from one of the local banks, and that's why we pursue going directly with the bank, because it was lower cost in general for the transaction, and also the interest rates were accessible.
Got it. Thanks for that explanation. And I see Mr. Glenn is present, but just to ask, and who's borrower's counsel for this transaction?
Sean Glenn from Aaron Fox. Yes.
Got it. And has there been any community engagement by Washington Latin on this matter? Any ANC involvement, any opposition or support from the community for this?
Yes, we have been engaging the community, and we have the support of the commissioner of the ANC commissioner from Ward 5. He's even written a letter on our behalf to support this project.
Okay, great. When do you plan on closing?
We are going to plan on closing on July 18th.
18th?
Yes, July 18th.
Got it. Thank you very much. I don't have any other questions at this time. Is there anything else that you'd like to add to the record before I turn to our government witnesses?
But I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that you to obtain your support.
Great, thank you. All right, I'm going to turn to our government witness. I know that Mr. Liggins has already been sworn in. If Mr. Jackson, frankly, might be helpful if Gregory Johnson wants to go ahead and get sworn in now, so we can just knock that out. If you don't mind, you can stay where you are. It's fine. I can see you from there. If you want to raise your right hand. Do you each swear or affirm under the penalty of law that the testimony you're going to be providing to the Council of the District of Columbia and the Committee on Business and Economic Development is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you very much, and let the record reflect that both have responded in the affirmative. Okay, I'm going to turn to you for your testimony. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and the members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I'm Stan Jackson, serve as the project manager at the DC Revenue Bond Enterprise Zone Program, a function within the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. I am here today testifying on behalf of the Washington Latin Public Charter School that the council approves the issuance of the District of Columbia Revenue Bond to the Washington Latin Public Charter School. The proposed revenue bond issuance will be in one or more series not to exceed an amount of $55 million. Washington Latin has requested that the district issue up to $55 million in revenue bonds in one or more series for the financing, refinancing, or reimbursing of costs associated with the borrower's authorized project located at 4301 Harewood Road, Northeast Washington, D.C., in the Ward 5 neighborhood. The bonds, if issued, will be secured by a general obligation of Washington Latin Public Charter School and will be without recourse to the District of Columbia. Based upon the information set forth in the application, the Revenue Bond Program has determined that the proposed project complies with criteria for approval of a proposed financing transaction through the district's Revenue Bond Program. Additionally, the proposed project will promote education, trade, and commerce, enhance employment opportunities, and contribute to the community embetterment. This here concludes my testimony, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. Just a couple of questions. Do you agree with the timeline that the witness testified to earlier? What's your understanding of when this project would close?
Yes. If we can get on the agenda to vote for the July vote, yes.
Okay. And have you explained to the applicant that these bonds are not the district's liabilities?
Yes, sir.
And have you determined that the borrower is a qualified applicant under all applicable district requirements?
Yes, sir.
Have you determined that the bonds will be used to finance a project that is authorized to receive funding through the district?
Absolutely.
Is the borrower, to your knowledge, able to service the debt resulting from the proposed financing?
Yes.
And who did DMPED use as bond counsel on this particular matter?
We have ORC.
ORC, and who's the attorney at ORC?
Darren Glim.
Okay.
Over at ORC. Yeah.
All right, thank you. I don't have any additional questions on this matter. Is there anything else you'd like to add to the record before we go to our next measure?
No, I appreciate you all and your time today.
Thank you for your time and testimony this afternoon. All right, I will not reiterate the entire introduction, but we're going to revisit PR 25-805, the Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024. I understand that our public witnesses are available virtually. And so we're going to turn now to Jim Knight, who is the president and CEO of Jubilee Housing. It's great to see you and appreciate that you're able to have the time to be here and provide testimony in this matter. Good afternoon to you. You can begin your testimony. Do we need to pull it? Okay. I don't know, maybe we'll reschedule it. You want to reach out, see if he needs us to reschedule it? I'm not sure if there's some technical challenges, but our understanding from staff is that he is declining the request to migrate. Okay. We see Jim Knight in the waiting room and on the panel. Jim Knight, can you hear us? If so, you can turn on your video and unmute yourself and hear your testimony.
Greetings,
All right,
Chairman. My apologies for the inconvenience.
Okay, we can hear you and see you now. So it's a pleasure to see you as always. Jim, you want to go ahead and begin your testimony?
Absolutely. Thank you, Chairman McDuffie and other members of the committee. My name is Jim Knight, and I serve as the president and CEO of Jubilee Housing. We're a 50-year-old nonprofit that develops, manages, and provides social services for affordable housing communities in the neighborhoods of Adams Morgan, Columbia Heights, and Mount Pleasant in Ward 1. I'm a Ward 3 resident myself. I'm here in support of the Jubilee Housing Maycroft Revenue Bonds Project Approval Resolution of 2024. Just share a little bit with you about the project and then happily take any questions that you may have. We are seeking a bond issuance of $3.25 million that will enable us to refinance the ground floor level of a property known as the Maycroft. That is a mixed-use building that has 64 units of affordable housing above grade, and the ground floor level is a community services space that is home to several social service programs, some operated by our partner Martha's Table, and some operated by Jubilee itself. The upstairs housing units were financed using low-income housing tax credits in the district's Housing Production Trust Fund program, but the ground floor was condominiumized out of the housing and was financed with new market tax credits originally in 2017. We are nearing the end of the compliance period on the new markets financing, and it's time to refinance that debt. This program was an easy preference based on terms that were available, and we're excited to be presenting the project to you today.
And thank you for explaining that project and the work that you all are doing and how this bond program in the district would help further your work. Did, we have a lot of, pardon me one second. Pardon me. A lot of organizations similar to yours that have used the District of Columbia's revenue bond program on a number of occasions. And one question I often ask is if you have any feedback regarding the program, anything that works well, anything we can do to improve, or is it just one of the great programs that we have in the district? Just wanted to get your feedback on that, given your usage of the program.
I appreciate the question. I think we have found the process to be straightforward and reasonably efficient. The financing terms are preferable to what we can find in the marketplace elsewhere. The team has been attentive and effective. We've been very pleased with our process.
Great to hear it. Great to hear it. And who's your borrower's counsel on this transaction?
That's Scott Fyerson at Pepper Troutman.
Okay, you know whether or not that's a CBE firm based in the district or no?
Regional firm. They have a district office. I don't think they're CBE.
Got it. Okay, thanks for that. How about the community around the project? I know this is a refinance, but any occasion to engage in community around this transaction, and whether there's any feedback from ANCs or civic leadership, either for or against?
Yeah, I would say the original redevelopment that occurred in 2017 and 18, we were in all the ANC meetings. We were meeting with all the groups. We had full support from everybody. I will say we have not made the rounds at this particular time for this refinancing, but we've enjoyed nothing but support from the community between our programming that is after school for teens and college scholarship programming, between Martha's Tables, food distribution, and early childhood programming. The neighborhood has been extremely supportive of the work there.
I'm glad to hear that. No surprise there, given the work that you all have done over the years and the tremendous supports and services you provide to the community. When do you plan on closing this, assuming that we get this through the committee?
I think we believe this is the first or second week of August.
Okay. Got it.
Which I might add it right on
ahead.
time, given the maturing debt that's there now. That will be right on time.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that. I don't have any additional questions. Anything else you'd like to add to the record before I turn to our government witnesses for this transaction?
No, just really appreciate you and your service.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
All right.
I'm going to turn back to our government witnesses for this transaction. Both of you have already been sworn in. I'll remind you that you're still under oath, and I will turn to you to hear your testimony.
Thank you, Chairman McDuffie. Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie and members of the Committee on Business and Economic Development. I am Gregory Johnson, and I serve as Project Manager in the DC Revenue Bond Enterprise Zone Program, a function within the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development. I am testifying today to request on behalf of Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft, that the council approve the issuance of the District of Columbia revenue bonds to Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft. The proposed revenue bond issuance will be in one or more series in amount not to exceed $3,250,000. Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft, has requested that the District of Columbia issue up to $3,250,000 District of Columbia revenue bonds in one or more series to authorize and provide for the loan of the proceeds of the bonds to assist Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft, in the financing, refinancing, or reimbursement of costs associated with an authorized project pursuant to Section 490 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. The bonds, if issued, would be secured by a general obligation of Jubilee Housing, Inc., the Maycroft, and will be without recourse to the District of Columbia. Based upon the information set forth in the application, the Revenue Bond Program staff has determined that the proposed project complies with criteria for approval of a proposed financing transaction through the District's Revenue Bond Program. Additionally, the proposed project will promote housing, trade, and commerce, enhance employment opportunities, and contribute to community betterment. This concludes my testimony, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you.
And thank you for your testimony. Just a couple of questions to follow up. I think Jim Knight testified that the proposed timeline on closing this transaction, assuming that it passes through the council, is the first or second week of August. Is that your understanding?
Yes,
Okay. And have you explained to the applicant that these bonds are not the district's liabilities?
yes,
Have you determined that the borrower is a qualified applicant under the applicable requirements?
yes, sir.
Have you determined that the bonds will be used to finance a project that is authorized to receive funding through the district?
Yes, sir.
And to your knowledge, is the borrower able to service the debt resulting from the proposed financing?
Yes.
And who did Dempet use as bond counsel on the project?
The bond counsel is Tyber Hudson, Earl Horton.
Okay, got it. All right, I don't have any additional questions. Anything else you'd like to add to the record?
No, thank you. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you very much for your time. Anything else you need to add, then let us know. We'll incorporate it into the record for this matter.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The final measure on the committee's agenda is B 25-488, the Mount Vernon Eastern Market, Barracks Road, Gray Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Amendment Act of 2023. Before we take up that measure, we're going to take a brief recess. Let's reconvene in 6 minutes at 4:20 p.m.
Have you guys been sitting on here waiting all afternoon?
No.
I had it in the background.
I also had it in the background, so kind of.
Just so you know,
I think we're all been muted, so.
We are going to reconvene this Committee on Business and Economic Development hearing with the final measure on the committee's agenda. That is Bill 25-488, the Mount Vernon, Eastern Market, Barracks Row, Great Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Area Amendment Act of 2023. As I mentioned, is our final measure on the committee's agenda. Councilmember Charles Allen introduced this measure on September 21st, 2023, and it was referred to the committee on October 3rd, 2023. As introduced, this bill would expand two existing retail priority areas, including one to encompass Mount Vernon Triangle, and designate two new retail priority areas in the Eastern Market and Barracks Row neighborhoods eligible for the district's Great Streets program. The Great Streets program, led by the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development, offers local businesses in eligible corridors grant opportunities, technical support, and other supporting programs. The purpose of this program is to incentivize commercial revitalization by supporting existing businesses, attracting new companies, and creating jobs for residents. I'm going to turn to the introducer of this measure for an opening statement before we turn to our public witnesses. Councilman Allen.
Thank you very much, Chair McDuffie. First off, I appreciate you holding the hearing today. Also, thank you for the brief pause there. We were wrapping up the confirmation hearing for the DDOT director moments ago, and I see at least one of our witnesses was there testifying there. So in multiple hearings there, Mr. Robinson. But I just wanted to speak briefly here about Bill 25-488, our Mount Vernon, Eastern Market, Barracks Row, Great Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Amendment Act 2023. So I introduced this alongside with you, Mr. Chairman, really after just recognizing there is a giant swath of our Ward 6 commercial corridors that just aren't currently eligible for grants under the DMPED's Great Streets program. And that really is misaligned to what we see in the rest of our city, where most commercial corridors are eligible. For the general public, the Great Streets program is designed to support existing small businesses, attract new businesses, increase the district's tax base, create new job opportunities for district residents, and transform emerging corridors into thriving and inviting neighborhood centers by issuing grants up to $80,000 that a local business could use for everything from storefront renovations to equipment purchases, technology enhancements to help support e-commerce operations. When you look at a map of Great Streets, you really see, frankly, the hole in the donut. And unfortunately, that's in Ward 6. And so this bill has an opportunity to help fix that. It would bring in the commercial corridors in Mount Vernon Triangle, Eastern Market, Barracks Row, into our Great Streets program, recognizing them as priority areas under the program. The inclusion of these commercial corridors into the Great Streets program allow those local businesses to take advantage of additional supports that are currently offered to many other businesses in our city on their commercial corridors. I also want to note that simply expanding eligibility without adding more into the pool of funding is something I want to be very careful about. So I do want to work to make sure that we add more funding into the Great Streets program, because I think that's not only good for the new businesses that will hopefully be eligible, but also just overall as we use these dollars wisely to help support our local businesses. And just a quick thank you to the leaders of many of these different business organizations in Eastern Market, on Capitol Hill, in Mount Vernon Triangle, for partnering with us to advocate for this. So thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'll turn it back over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Allen. As you mentioned, we do have some of the leaders in these communities representing important organizations that have joined us today to testify. And so I'm going to turn to our public witnesses, all of whom have joined the committee virtually, and begin with Judy Thomas, Eastern Market, Main Street. Good afternoon to you. You can begin your testimony.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson McDuffie, and thank you for having me. My name is Judy Thomas, and I am the Program Manager for Eastern Market Main Street. Today, I am testifying in strong support of B25-0488, the Mount Vernon Triangle, Eastern Market, Barracks Row, Great Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Amendment Act of 2023, introduced by Councilmember Allen, and which you co-introduced. Thank you for your co-introduction and moving the bill forward to a hearing. Eastern Market Main Street was created in 2017 to capitalize on our existing historic assets and entrepreneurial culture to promote, retain, and attract diverse small businesses. We represent a range of local businesses from Eastern Market Shoe Repair to Buchert Saloon, and our boundaries cover a compact but dense few blocks adjacent to the historic market itself. I joined the Main Street as its program manager in 2023 with the mission of fostering the growth and culture of the community I live in, especially those existing and prospective small local businesses, exactly like those supported by the Great Streets grants. From the perspective of someone who is personally and professionally invested in the economic vitality of Capitol Hill, I strongly support expanding the Great Streets program's current boundaries to include both the Eastern Market area, the length of Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast from 2nd Street to Barney Circle, and into Barracks Row. When we think about small businesses in the district, we need to be focusing on resiliency and sustainability as well as new opportunity. Some minority-owned legacy businesses have survived multiple cycles of development, downturn, and redevelopment, but many have not, and many do not have the benefit of support to open in the first place. Bringing Great Streets funding to the southern portion of Capitol Hill would let organizations like EMMS, in partnership with our sister organizations, Capitol Hill BID and Barracks Row, help our much smaller businesses get funding for projects outside their normal tight budgets. It would help persuade building owners to work in conjunction with their tenants on beautification initiatives and serve as a bridge from cottage industry to market vendor to brick and mortar space. Making this funding available to businesses in this part of Capitol Hill helps maintain our vibrant neighborhood's diversity and vitality from being slowly driven out and homogenized. It allows new small and local businesses to get a foothold in the highly priced rental market and provides those legacy businesses who own their buildings the chance to pursue delayed maintenance and improvements on these old historic buildings. It makes viable the connection from Ward 6 to neighboring wards, where we've been trying to establish a pipeline of shared resources, collaboration, and promotion, for example, connecting the Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast corridor across the Anacostia River. Ward 6 has only one Great Streets retail priority area on 8th Street, and that is incredibly important. However, the rest of Capitol Hill's small business community is far from homogenous and frankly far from stable. Many of our smallest businesses are really struggling, and this funding would help them enormously. Thank you very much for your time in moving the bill forward, and I am happy to answer any questions.
And thank you so much for your testimony this afternoon. We'll turn to our next witness, Brian Reddy.
All right, thank you. Good morning, Chairman McDuffie and the members of the Committee of Business and Economic Development. I am Brian Reddy, and I serve as the Executive Director for Barracks Row Main Street. I testify today in request on behalf of the businesses located within the boundaries of this Main Street that the Council approve Bill 25-0488, the Mount Vernon Eastern Market Barracks Row Great Streets Neighborhood Priority Amendment Act of 2023. This bill would allow the amount of support to our small businesses in a competitive and ever-changing environment. This proposed bill would give businesses access to additional capital who wish to improve their place of business. The Great Streets retail grants allow for larger improvement projects and businesses can get from Main Street programs. Barracks Row Main Street resides in Capitol Hill's historic district. Though this designation can be beneficial, it does come with additional costs. Businesses in the historic district frequently pay much more in renovation, repairs, and maintenance. Having greater access to capital through the Great Streets program would be a long way to relieve these burdens. Additionally, the proposed bill would increase Barracks Row Main Street's ability to promote 8th Street corridor and provide training and grant opportunities to businesses, which in turn equals greater taxable income for the district and contributes to our community betterment. I conclude my testimony, and I'm available to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. We appreciate it. We're going to turn next to Patty Brosner. Good afternoon to you. You can begin your testimony. You'll have 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman McDuffie. My name is Patty Brosmer, and I'm the president of the Capitol Hill Business Improvement District. For over 2 decades, the BID has been dedicated to enhancing the commercial vibrancy of Capitol Hill by supporting local businesses and improving our neighborhood's streetscapes. I come before you today in support of B 25-0488, the Mount Vernon Triangle Eastern Market Barracks Row Great Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Amendment Act of 2023, co-introduced by yourself and Councilmember Charles Allen. This legislation marks a pivotal step towards expanding the Great Streets program to include the Eastern Market area, the entirety of Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast, from 2nd Street to Barney Circle and Barracks Row. The Capitol Hill BID encompasses a significant portion of Ward 6, covering 5 linear miles, 82 block faces, and supporting over 450 businesses. many of which are small, locally owned businesses and nonprofits. These businesses form the backbone of our community, contributing to its unique character and economic vitality. Expanding the Great Streets program to encompass Pennsylvania Avenue Southeast and adjacent areas is essential to ensuring equitable economic development across the district. These funds will empower our small businesses to undertake much-needed projects that would otherwise be beyond their financial reach. Each micro neighborhood within Capitol Hill, from Barracks Row to Eastern Market and beyond, possesses distinct needs and challenges. Many of our smallest businesses are facing significant hurdles, exacerbated by recent economic conditions. The infusion of Great Streets funding will provide them with the support they need to innovate, grow, and continue serving our community. Thank you for your time and consideration, and I'm available to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you for your testimony this afternoon. We're going to turn to our fourth and final witness for this virtual panel, Kenyatta Robinson. Good to see you. We'll hear your testimony.
Good to see you as well, Mr. Chairman, Councilmember McDuffie, and members of the committee. My name is Kenyatta Robinson, and I'm the President and CEO of the Mount Vernon Triangle Community Improvement District. I testified to express my strong support for Bill 25-0488, the Mount Vernon, Eastern Market, Barracks Road, Great Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Amendment Act of 2023 that would, specific to my testimony today, designate the Mount Vernon Triangle as a retail priority area for the purposes of being eligible for Great Streets retail small business grants. With our proximity to the traditional downtown and diverse population, this proposed expansion is especially timely for Mount Vernon Triangle due to our rise of our vibrant culinary scene, cultural events, and community-oriented retail to residents and visitors alike. Mount Vernon Triangle has approximately 30 to 35 businesses that would qualify for grants of their program, representing an opportunity for our emerging area of the district to continually attract and retain businesses, particularly small local restaurants, and create new opportunities within a vibrant, walkable community. More broadly, this bill represents a crucial step toward enhancing the vibrancy of our neighborhood by promoting local retail and small businesses. Mount Vernon Triangle is not just a place to live, work, and visit. It is a community with a unique history, culture, and small businesses that contribute immensely to the quality of life in Washington, D.C. Here are several reasons why I believe passing this bill is vital. It supports our local businesses, it enhances community character, it promotes economic growth and job creation, it supports quality of life and improves quality of life, and it supports our commitment to sustainability, because walkable retail is sustainable retail. The Mount Vernon Triangle, Eastern Market, Barracks Road, Great Streets Neighborhood Retail Priority Amendment Act of 2023 is forward-thinking legislation that aligns with the values and aspirations of our businesses while fostering economic growth and community resilience. I urge the passage of Bill 25-0488 as an investment in the future of our neighborhoods that ensures Mount Vernon Triangle remains vibrant and thriving for generations to come. Thank you again for allowing me to testify on this very important issue that we deem to be a critical priority for our community. We appreciate your consideration of this request and are happy to answer any follow-up questions that you may have.
And thank you for your testimony. I want to thank, again, each of the witnesses for providing testimony before the committee this afternoon on this measure. I think Councilmember Allen raised in his opening remarks an issue that I've presented to my colleagues at the council about tremendously important programs like the Great Streets program, which is, they're so important and so popular to communities and businesses across District of Columbia. But in some instances in the past, I am responsible for having expanded to include more areas and more businesses that could use these programs, but have not appropriately raised the amount of funding available. And so we have introduced more businesses, but have not seen a commensurate increase in the funding so that all those wonderful businesses, the deserving businesses, could fully, I think, appreciate the resources that DMPED and the Great Street program provides. It's something that I know both Councilmember Allen and I plan to work on. And so I don't have any questions of you all. I'm very familiar with each of your organizations and the great work that you're doing. And I plan to work with Councilmember Allen to move this bill. But I will turn to him for a round of questions as he has any for the witnesses.
And we're on 30-minute rounds, Mr. Chair. Is that, the good news here is with everybody testifying in support, that's great. And so thank you all for taking the time to do that. You know, I'll try to be relatively brief here, just since it sounds like we've got some good consensus, which is always a good thing. You know, what really drove me here to recognize we just needed to introduce a bill and get this moving is, again, I take a look at the map, and when basically the entirety of Connecticut Avenue and Wisconsin Avenue and Northwest are eligible, when basically the entirety of Ward 1 is eligible. Georgia Avenue, the H Street corridor, a lot of our commercial corridors are eligible. And then we kind of have this pretty big gap with Barracks Row, Pennsylvania Avenue, Eastern Market, Mount Vernon Triangle. I just think it's something we really need to be able to move forward to make sure that our local businesses are on the same footing as many of our other businesses, so they're eligible for these grants. I can't guarantee who's going to get the funds. I completely agree with my colleague. We need to work to get more money into the pot for these funds so that more people will be able to actually get meaningful investments here. But I guess to my one question I will ask is, these corridors have not been eligible for a long time, but you probably do work with colleagues in other corridors that have been eligible. When you talk to your retailers, I feel like I hear from them, but I just want to ask you too. I've had a lot of businesses tell me they feel that they're just kind of left out, or the city's not backing them in the way they're backing other businesses. They feel like they're kind of missing an opportunity. Do you hear from your local businesses on your corridors that say, why aren't we eligible? Like, we would just like to at least be able to compete for the same dollars that our colleagues are. Am I accurate in what I'm hearing? Do you hear the same thing? And that's what necessitates legislation like this.
If I could, constantly. And I think that when DIMPED had that really great Retail Grant and Grow conference earlier this year, that was one of the reasons why a lot of our businesses in Eastern Market didn't sign up and go, because the perception is that grant money is available, but not for us. And so that is definitely a perception that they have.
I'll tag on to that. Years ago, we have a small business here, and in fact, they opened up another business right next door, a coffee shop, a husband and wife, and they're actually getting our Community Stakeholder of the Year awards at our upcoming annual meeting. And the announcement would come out about the grants, and he would say, "Hey, how could I, qualify for this?" And I say, "Unfortunately, we're not part of the footprint." And this wasn't, a very large or wealthy business owner. This was just someone who got a storefront and opened a small business and then opened up a second small business. And then the next year, same thing. "Hey, how can we qualify for this?" There will be a follow-up question to DSLBD, to DIMPED, and it would be somewhat philosophical. Like, Mount Vernon Triangle isn't an area that's an area of target, but we have a bifurcation of businesses here. We have businesses like an RPM Italian, and we have the small local barbershop, that's here as well. And so it's not a one-size-fit-all neighborhood. I think that was probably the perception, maybe by some in the city, that it was. But we have business owners of all sizes and persuasions here in the neighborhood, and many of whom who would qualify for a grant like this. So I appreciate this legislation coming forward because it gives me an opportunity now to talk to Mr. Khalil about this program that hopefully we can roll out in Mount Vernon Triangle to benefit him as well.
Thank you. Mr. Reddy or Ms. Brosmer, anything you would add there?
I'll add that I think there's a perception, I don't know so much in the council, but across the city that Capitol Hill is, a wealthy area. But there are scores of businesses that are small businesses that are just trying to make it. Almost all of Eastern Market vendors would probably qualify if they wanted to get some upgrades in their equipment or their technology. So I think it's a misperception.
Yeah.
Yes, I was going to piggyback on that as well, and also echo what I mentioned in my testimony, be it that even though we are not the only historic district in this wonderful historic city, but being in a historic district, once we have wonderful benefits of doing so, but cost of making improvements to the building, or just new licensures where we had to, if people want indoor trash rooms, because it is a historic building, there's a lot more resources that need to go into that construction for that. So having this grant available to businesses to be able to make those upgrades along with what we already have would be great.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, and to Ms. Brosmer, to your point, I think the reason why we have this hole is because at some point way back, people had this perception that maybe, well, this neighborhood doesn't need it, quote unquote. But I mean, again, I just have to look at the map, like Wisconsin Avenue in Georgetown is eligible. The entire Golden Triangle bid area is eligible. All of Connecticut Avenue Northwest is eligible. So somewhere along the line, that perception maybe is the cause of why it wasn't added earlier, but I do think it just doesn't stand to reason that we think these other corridors are going to be eligible, but somehow these aren't. And so I just can't stand to let our commercial corridors in Ward 6 be left out. And so I appreciate Councilor McDuffie for partnering with me on this legislation to get introduced. I hope this hearing is the next step to be able to move it forward. And then I think we all need to work to help advocate to make sure that the funds for the overall program go up so that not just you all and the business you represent, but obviously a lot of our small businesses across the city also have greater access to these funds, which I think will be a meaningful difference. And I think it's frankly part of our overall recovery strategy for our local businesses that have been hustling for the last couple of years, and they're looking for help in every way they can find it. So I don't have any further questions at this point. Sounds like you're hearing directly from businesses that say they'd like to be eligible, they want to compete. It seems to make a whole lot of sense. And so I just appreciate all four of you taking time out so that you can give voice to your corridors in the hearing today. And again, Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you holding this hearing today and look forward to partnering with you to move this forward.
And I appreciate you for introducing this measure and working with the committee, Councilmember Allen. As well, I appreciate the four witnesses who testified this afternoon on this measure. And finally, I appreciate and want to thank everyone who testified on the measures that came before the committee's agenda today. As a reminder, those interested in submitting written testimony for the record may do so until Thursday, June 27th at 5 p.m. Submissions should be uploaded via the hearing management system on the council's website at dccouncil.gov. There being no further business before the committee, this marks the end of today's public hearing. The time is 4:52 p.m. and this hearing is adjourned.
Thank you.